Welcome to the UK PT's podcast, where we delve into the world of personal training one episode at a time. Here are your hosts, Joshua Mullin and Mark Laws.
Welcome to episode 11 of the UK PT's podcast. I'm Joshua Mullin, and as always, here's my co-host Mark. How you doing, Mark?
I'm very good, Josh. I'm feeling very festive. I've got my Christmas jumper on, another reindeer jumper. I'm good. How are you?
I'm all good. I'm a little bit gutted as I ordered a Die Hard Christmas jumper, and I'm at the office at the moment, and it's been delivered, but to my house. So I was hoping it would be here in time, but it is what it is. So I just want to say a big thank you for today's two sponsors for this episode. So firstly, we've got EMD UK, who are the national governing body for group exercise. But alongside doing an amazing job as a governing body, they also offer insurance for fitness professionals. So that's personal trainers, gym instructors, massage therapists, boot camp owners, whatever it is. And they provide really, really comprehensive coverage, but at an amazing price. So if you'd like more information, there'll be a link below me now. Mark, who is our second sponsor?
The second sponsor is Wolverson Fitness. They provide a wide range of fitness equipment. They're very well known for the barbells, kettlebells, dumbbells, and all that razzmatazz, but they have got a very, very thorough encyclopedia almost list of equipment that they have available. So go and take a look. You can use the code UKPT10. Your friends, your clients can have a 10% discount on equipment. And while you're at it, do the right thing and get yourselves insured. If you are not insured, or you're not sure if you're insured, then fucking go on the EMD site and sort it. It's peanuts, and you will be adding credibility to our industry by having things like that in place. But we don't have a relationship with them just for shits and giggles. It's to try and raise the standards of the industry. So buy yourself some fitness kit from Wolverson, get yourself insured, sit back, enjoy the show, which is with Chris Peil.
Yeah, so Chris is... he's been a speaker at our live events. He's been interviewed by yourself for the Underground Strength course. He's an insanely knowledgeable guy going for his doctorate. I think we should just get into it.
Let's do it. Right, Chris, round one of the 27 club is based loosely on your education. Josh has got the timer ready, so you've got 90 seconds to answer 9 questions. Are you ready?
Yep.
Okay, Josh.
Ready?
You may start the timer. Chris Peil, in what year did you qualify as a personal trainer?
2007.
And who was the education provider?
Body Logic.
How long did it take you to complete the course?
Can't remember. Not long.
Doesn't matter. What was the last bit of CPD that you completed?
I did a webinar with bases on Wednesday last week.
Okay. And what is the next bit of CPD that you've got your eye on?
The stupid doctorate I started.
Does a doctorate count as CPD? I suppose it does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
What is the highest level of qualification or education that you currently have?
Masters.
And should a personal trainer ever be reassessed? And if so, how often?
Oh, interesting. I think it'd be better if we just started off with enforcing CPD from like legitimate sources. That might be a bit better.
Cool. And what skill did you gain on your personal training course that you use most often today?
Oh. Personal training course is a bit of a certificate collection thing. There wasn't that individual course wasn't the best, I have to say.
So it's fair to say there's not much that you use today from it.
Yeah, because that in itself, that one wasn't one of the things that was like a big step forward in that.
Yeah, that's not a problem. That makes our argument stronger about ongoing education. So that's not an issue. Last question, even though we're out of time, doesn't matter. On a scale of 1 to 10, how good are you at your job?
Which job?
You tell me which job.
I don't think it matters. Awesome, obviously 10.
10. Nice.
Yeah, easy.
Nice. Josh, round 2.
If I don't believe, who else will believe, Mark?
I believe you're at least a 7.
Well, I've got to believe, otherwise no one else will. Fake it till you make it, mate.
Okay, so round 2 is all about the fitness industry itself. So, question number 1. Name the most underrated person, product, or thing in the fitness industry.
Formal education.
Nice. Number 2. Name the most overrated person, product, or thing in the industry.
Completely made up CPD courses.
Nice. Number 3. Which books do you think all personal trainers should read? Book.
The NSCA Essentials of Strength and Conditioning.
Nice. Foam rolling, yes or no?
Context.
Nice. For how long did you do gym hours before being exclusive as a personal trainer, if you did gym hours?
Oh yeah, loads. Years.
Which common fitness myth do you wish you could debunk forever?
Don't know really. Again, context. It's all context in that.
This is very true. What is the best piece of work-related advice you've ever been given?
Don't know really.
Who would be the ultimate fitness industry podcast guest?
I like Dan John. I still like Dan John.
Dan John, good guy. What are your favourite 3 exercises?
Oh, don't know really. Windmills. I like windmills a lot. I don't know. It changes time to time. Like windmills, like dips, like chins, like swings.
What about those Laws lunges that I gave you?
No one likes those. No one likes that. But they have been really, really good, mate. I have to say, for lateral stability with the runner, it's been really helpful.
There we go.
Yeah.
So you're saying that's one of your 3 favourite exercises, yeah?
I'm saying that's better than any of my favourite exercises because it's got your name on it.
There we go.
Mark, what is this exercise? You have to explain now.
Well, I made it up and I called it something like a switching lunge. And then when I gave Chris the program to do, he was like, "Mate, you've got to put your name on it because you just have to and just see if it catches on." I don't think it will catch on. Basically, snatch. So dumbbell is up in a locked overhead position. The opposite leg lunges back into a reverse lunge, but the knee touches down on the floor. Then the knee of the front leg joins it on the floor. So you're on both knees. Then the first leg lunges forward and then you stand up. So it's like a switching lunge. But Chris insists that it should be called the Laws lunge. And who am I to argue?
But what I got with this is I was already doing, because that was one of the things that I did with a lot of people, a lot of like single leg work and a lot of like different weird variations and stuff, and would have said that compared to a lot of people, I was reasonably well balanced in more of like a multiplanar kind of way. And it was really hard, really, really hard, miles harder than I expected it to be. And what I found was when you put the other knee down and you had to shift your weight across to give yourself enough room to lift the other leg back out from under you and stand up, it was so hard laterally. And I've ended up with a few runners, which is weird because I never liked running ever because I'm a fat kid and fat kids hate running. So I got these runners who were basically they were basically too weak and massively laterally too weak. So they were picking up injuries, and then they were going to see somebody who'd rub them, and they'd feel a bit better, and then they'd run again, and then they'd be sore again, and they weren't getting anywhere. And I had some good success with one, and then she brought a few more with her. And we've done loads of sort of lateral work, and that, again, it was ace. The ones who struggled most laterally literally just couldn't do it. So you had like guys who, I think of guys like 80 odd kilos, and I'll get them doing trap bar lifts because it's technically pretty easy, and obviously it helps them resist the impact of running, the sort of vertical impact aspect without adding more impact. So it conditions them for it without making things worse by just doing it. And he might do, he might do body weight and a half for sets. So he's not weak. Can't do like 8 kilos on Lord's lunges. Can't do them. Wow. Really struggles with them. And again, he actually came initially with an injury that was lateral, and we've already done a load of lateral work. But that combination, for some reason, and in a way, it kind of goes against logic, and I must be able to work out why this is. Because you're making the lever of your legs shorter, aren't you? By kneeling down. So you think it will be easier, because the lever's shorter, to be able to stabilize laterally, but it's not, which must be about taking the foot out of it. It must be that you can't balance with the foot. There's no proprioception from the foot. So it's harder somehow for you to sense the position you're in or something, but it makes that lateral thing so hard. And it's been really, really helpful for them.
I won't lie to you. None of that was part of the plan. It was just, it was a variation that I made up to regress a Turkish get-up and to progress a lunge. And it's sort of like met in the middle as like a progression for some stuff, a regression for another. And like I say, I had a big crossover, especially with a lot of guys who, professional athletes that I've worked with in the last 5 or 6 years have mostly been ice hockey. So there's that stability in the shoulder. So just putting the shoulder in a fixed position to stabilize for an extended period while everything underneath it is moving in a sort of chaotic way, it just really helped them to fucking cream the puck.
Well, again, ice hockey's ace, because the way you move on the skates is a massive adductor issue. So adductor tears and then hip problems. So I don't know if you've looked at any of it, but the adductor-abductor ratio at the hip for ice hockey is a big deal, and adductor strengthening. So they do loads like the Copenhagen exercise stuff and whatever else protectively, or they should do. If they've got decent S&C bikes, that's what they should be doing, because there is some good evidence for that for ice hockey. And I think if you think of the rehab side as a spectrum, and you start with, okay, have they got the basic range of motion there? Can they stabilize it? Things like Copenhagen's should be coming in quite early on that rehab spectrum, where it's controlled and it's not a functional looking movement or pattern in any way, is it? It's like an isolated, for people who are listening, don't know what like a Copenhagen is. It's like being a side plank position, but you're being held by the top leg. So you're using the inner thigh on the upper leg to lift you, rather than the outer thigh on the lower leg, if that makes sense. So it's a hip adductor, direct specific exercise. Developed in Copenhagen, hence called Copenhagen's. It's used in football, that's where it came from, but it's had a big crossover into ice hockey, because if you think ice hockey is you move explosively and open your legs up, so you get this dynamic demand through it. Something like a Lord's lunge is massively helpful to come in slightly later in that process, because you're getting that isolated strength to cross over into more of a relevant, actual like integrated pattern. So I think it's got loads of applications. I think it's got applications for ice hockey, and it was something that like say it's ace to come across something that completely throws you off when you're starting to get a bit of the, well, yeah, I've got this single leg stuff, and I've got this like unilateral stuff, and I've got this, yeah, I'm good at all this, and just something completely left field properly throw you off. I was struggling to do it with a weight that I'd be able to like windmill for like 20 reps, no problem. So
if you want me to send you a video of me doing it with a 50k dumbbell, that's no problem. I'll ping it over.
Yes, please.
That's impressive, mate. That is legitimately impressive. If you can send the bloopers as well, that'd be ace.
I don't do
We
bloopers.
don't just want to see the final result.
I don't do bloopers. I'm a machine. That's over 50% body weight, by the way. Anyway, mate, we digress slightly. And I'll tell you what I will do, Josh. I'll ping you over a video of a Law's lunge so you can stick it in the show notes for those who want to see it in full swing and want to try it.
I'll put it below me here somewhere.
What, and try and claim it's yours?
No, I'll just put it into the podcast.
Oh, okay. Round 3 of the quick fire round.
Oh, sorry. Back on.
You're all right. Digression is part of the process. Josh, you good with the timer?
Yep.
Right, Chris. Cats or dogs?
Dogs.
Favorite city you've ever visited?
Amsterdam.
If you could attend a concert and anyone, dead or alive, could be playing, who would it be?
Don't know, really.
Pass.
Yeah,
what
pass.
was the last television series that you watched or streamed an episode of?
MasterChef, The Professionals.
Okay, now. If you could choose anybody to play you in a movie about your life, who would it be?
Obviously, The Rock.
Tea or coffee, and how do you take it?
Coffee, straight black.
If I could give you the power of time travel, would you rather go back to speak to your ancestors or forwards to speak to your descendants?
I've got no kids, so I think I'm going to have to go back.
Would you rather shag a goat and nobody will ever find out, or don't shag the goat and everybody will think that you have?
Pass.
You can't pass. Shag the goat.
Why can't I? Is that one I'm not allowed to pass?
Yeah, you're not allowed to pass, no.
Option A. No one knows. It's fine.
Okay. Please, finally, tell us one thing that is on your bucket list.
I haven't really got a bucket list.
Ooh.
Getting my doctorate would be nice. That would be nice. That's wishful thinking, but that's something I want to do.
We are hindering that massively at the minute by recording this podcast during your doctorate writing time.
Yeah, but in fairness, like as I said, like I've been pretty good at procrastinating. I can't really blame you guys for that.
That's right. You're going to have a PhD in it soon.
No, it'll be a professional doctorate. It's not even the proper one. It's like a fake doctorate, but it's cool. Still counts.
Yeah, I can print you one of them off if you want.
Well, can you also host a ceremony where I get to wear a funny hat? My parents can be proud. That's basically what it's about.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. Given the current climate, they won't be allowed to attend in public anyway. So it'll have to be like on Zoom. So we can put up a bit of a backdrop.
In fairness, we can actually segue this into this is the fitness industry stuff, isn't it? Literally, you can do fitness industry qualifications that have no, I say qualifications in a loose possible sense, fitness industry certificates, where they then give you a graduation that is recognised by fucking nobody.
Yeah.
And then the people doing that are actually happy about that. And they put a U at the end of things that everybody refers to as university when they're not a fucking university. But the irony is the person selling it went to university and is using the fact that they went to university to promote themselves to you, but telling you that if you do their thing, you don't need to go to university.
There's some irony in there somewhere.
Definitely, yes. But there we go. Hopefully everyone knows what I'm talking about. But
well, I think people do. Anyway, the good news is you're now a fully indoctrinated member of the 27 Club. And in the new year, we shall send you a T-shirt and you can send your mum and dad a picture. Awesome. We'll get The Rock to pass it over in a ceremony and everyone will be proud as fuck.
No, in fairness, mate, if you could Photoshop that together, me getting something from The Rock, that'd be ace. That would be my profile picture.
Okay, do you want to? If you want to see me Photoshop The Rock giving you something, then be careful what you wish for,
Yeah, okay, yeah.
because
That could be uncomfortable.
that shit will be on Instagram by lunchtime.
I'd probably let The Rock, it's fine.
Josh, we're moving into the interview section. Do you have any questions to start off with for Chris? Anything top of your list?
There's I've got about 7 questions. So I would say, yeah, the first one I'd like to start with, just to get things rolling. You know, obviously you're a learned scholar, you're a man of knowledge, and I've you know, when we've spoken in the past, Chris, you know, you've done everything from therapy, rehab. You've worked with you know, world's strongest man competitors, etc. Like, you know, the list is endless. So what and who have been your biggest influences so far?
So the learning scholar thing is a really nice compliment, to be fair, because that's probably not entirely true, really, and that's what I've kind of been alluding to with some of the other stuff that came a lot later. So I am a personal trainer, and quite happy and quite proud of that. That's my background. That's where I came from. But organically, some things happened where I was being asked to do things that exceeded what I think is, well, no, what I think is exceeded what is the insurable scope of practice of personal trainer. And that led to having to go off and do other things, because to me, you've got to make a choice. You've got to either say, do you know what, I'm a personal trainer and I will say no to those opportunities, even if I'm being offered them. Or you say, God, I really want those opportunities and they seem to be there. I am going to upskill so I can actually increase my scope. And you make an ethical choice. And I think the biggest issue we have is that as an industry, on the private training side, there is certainly a group of people who are slightly preying upon the trainers within the industry by pretending that they're offering things that might increase their scope of practice, but actually aren't going to in any meaningful way. And I think that's a bit unfortunate and a bit of a problem. So we think about things that are, in terms of answering the question, when you say who's been an inspiration, a bit of a tricky one, because for me on that process, it was more of a case of having to go and find people who would give me the opportunity to expand that scope. So it probably comes down to the best influence that I've had, or one of the most useful influences I had, was a guy called Mark Leather, who you won't be familiar with, I wouldn't have thought, but he was head of medicine at Bolton Wanderers when they were in the Premier League, and he was there for about 10 years. And he was a lecturer on the sports medicine masters that I kind of managed to blag myself onto. And he actually wasn't in any way negative, judgmental, difficult about me being a personal trainer. He was absolutely for, yeah, you've taken the right attitude and said you want to kind of increase your skill set, your competency, your scope of practice. Yeah, fantastic. Let's do that then. And he was really good. And what was difficult was when I decided that I wanted to do that, I actually came across quite a number of people who were either initially just completely dismissive. I was like, no, we're not entertaining that at all. No, you're a personal trainer, stay in your box, and that's it. And then there were a number of people who initially went, okay, yeah, that's fine. Yeah. Including somebody at the university who actually offered me the place to do the masters. And then when I started, was actually really negative. It was like, no, you need to be seen and not heard. You need to not contribute and know your place, personal trainer boy, sit in the corner. So he was probably the most influential sort of single individual, I'd have said, in terms of making that progress and that step.
You mentioned when Josh asked you the question about ultimate podcast guests, and I assume it'd probably be a similar theme when it comes to like books and sources of information that you've read. You mentioned Dan John. Would it be fair to say that he fits into that sort of category slightly? And if so, what is it that you like about him and his approach?
Yeah, so from a fitness industry side, and somebody that people might know of and can go and look at, I would say yes. And he's from a very, very legitimate background. So he's worked in, as I understand it, high school and college sport as a strength and conditioning coach for a long, long time. And you're talking about people who've worked in environments where if you're not very good, you don't last because the results are important. So I think there's a bit of a, you always get the argument, don't you? People going, oh, well, we need to listen to him because he's got 1 million certificates. And then the other people going, yeah, but what has he done? And then you've got the guys who are going, well, we need to listen to him because he's coached 10 champions. And other people going, yeah, but he's got no legitimate sort of academic background. And I used to always kind of think, well, surely we can have like both. And as I understand it, like Dan John is one of those people who's actually both. You know, he's legitimately qualified, otherwise you don't get to work in those environments. And he's stayed and been successful in those environments for many, many years. And it means that when he gets asked stuff, he tends to have quite a middle of the road, sensible, non-dogmatic response. So instead of going down like a rabbit hole and trying to argue with everyone else and make himself right by everyone else having to be wrong, he's quite respectful, isn't he? He's just like, you know, yeah, and really sensible, a lot of the time fairly middle of the road answers. And one of the biggest things he does that I think most people could learn loads from is I get pigeonholed as like your mobility or flexibility or weird circus trick man or whatever, which I would argue is actually a little bit unfair. The reason that came like that is because I was working with a lot of strength guys who were really, really good at basic barbell strength movements in a gym, and then could not translate that into the same level of performance when they actually had to move about and things. So a lot of the shit that we did to make them better at that may have fallen into this hippie movementy stuff. But if I get somebody come in who's a yogi and is massively unstable, but got massive range of motion and massively unstable, they get strength and stability work to do because they don't need to do more. So it's not about beating your own drum and saying everyone who works with me does this. It's about saying, well, what does this person actually need to get the results that they want? And it should be based on what they want and need, their goals and the needs analysis. And then from the needs analysis, actually filling in the blanks. So really, I'd like to be thought more of as filling in the blanks, man. And filling in the blanks might be for some people heavy basic barbell movements because that's what they can't do and they're not doing. And we do know that basically the most measurable, simplest thing you can do to be less injury prone is be stronger relative to your body weight. So an awful lot of people, an awful lot of the population do need that. But as we've talked about, there's a lot of different ways to get stronger that don't necessarily mean just basic barbell, just basically, you know, bastardized powerlifting. And actually the issue with bastardized powerlifting is you get strong bent over, you get strong with your hips massively flexed. You don't get strong, relatively speaking, standing up, because by the time you stood up, the lifts are all over. So all of the sports and daily activities that take place standing up, you're selling a bit short if all you ever do is lifts that focus on being strong when you're bent over.
Josh, sorry for hijacking your questions. It's Chris paused. Chris, can you still hear me?
Yeah, I've got you. Yeah, I got you.
Okay.
Sorry, guys. I think we're having a fire alarm. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just quickly go check, but I'm going to leave this running, all right?
All right, no worries. We'll give you a minute.
Cool. Don't get burnt to death.
Oh, no, stopped.
Have I got you?
Yeah, mate, I'm here. Yeah.
Cool. Hopefully that went some way to answering your questions as to why I like Dan John.
Yeah, no, it definitely did. I mean, for me, the thing I like the most about Dan John is the simplicity in that when you say someone like him who should be on a higher pedestal than he probably is, somebody of his status would usually try to bamboozle you with how fucking clever they are or how brilliant they are, how complicated they make stuff, and you're too stupid to understand it. That's why you're not as good as me. But his approach is the opposite. It's to ridiculously simplify it. So if you it actually becomes very, very easy to take his strategies and methodologies and to implement them because they are so basic and effective.
Well, and he does that at the same time as prioritizing. So he doesn't do the Ripto thing of going, I'm going to make it simple, but then I'm basically going to make every peg fit with this hole I've decided is this shape. He makes it simple, but also makes people prioritize and goes, okay, don't worry too much about just lifting weights and the details. You lift weights over time, you'll get stronger. And he actually says that. And it's like, yeah, that's actually true. So when people are arguing over like different set and schemes, they're already lifting weights loads. They're already strong relative to the body weight, but they can't move about. He has real simple tests that then make them prioritize moving about. So he makes them move away from the thing they're focused on, which is probably, again, why people don't like him. The people who want to just focus on the gym bro mentality want to find information that affirms their existing bias. So they actually like the people who want to talk about the details that don't matter, the thing that they're already good at. They don't want to engage with the guy that they need to engage with, which is Dan John, who says, oh, that's great. So you can already do all these strength tests. Fantastic. What about getting up off the floor without using your hands? Oh, you can't do that. Right, we need to look at that. Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, they don't want that. They want somebody who says to them, yeah, bro, you don't need to do that. Just put more on the bar. It's like, well, yeah, again, further down your rabbit hole.
Yeah.
I suppose it's processing it. It takes time. We all start off with we just want to do more of what we like. That's how you start, isn't it?
Well, it's human nature, isn't it? Time. I honestly, I do find a lot of people seem to be quite intimidated of simplifying what they're doing. They almost like, it's like most personal trainers struggle financially, and they struggle to learn enough to be able to help clients enough. That's the nature of the beast. And I think then it probably becomes a bit too difficult for a lot of them to admit that some of the solutions could be way down here with the simple stuff, because they want to think that all the answers are up here with the real complicated stuff. So I must be looking for something that's more complicated that's going to help me. And I think invariably.
See, I think that you're absolutely bob on. I think that if we think about it, comes back to needs analysis, because if your needs analysis is good and your skills of needs analysis are good, and that's subjective then into objective actual fitness testing, but a varied battery of like fitness testing skills, and you can take the fitness testing results in context of the subjective needs analysis, and you can make, so in English, if you've asked them what they actually want, then you've done some tests in the gym to see what they can actually do, and you're developing a roadmap, that makes your job and the value you're adding really straightforward. You're just like, okay, so what I've done is I've gone, Doris needs to be able to walk about without falling over and breaking a hip. So what we've done is we've looked at the characteristics in the gym that mean you can basically catch your own body weight. How many sit stands can she do off a bench before she can't do it without using her arms on her legs? Oh, none. Right, okay, so basically we need to get her stronger in the short term. That's our priority. We'll retest in however many weeks. We set off with this process. Then from there, we can advance that process and we start doing things that are a bit more dynamic, like actually almost like simulated falling, like lunge drops or whatever, so that we take that strength and we get it into the things that are actually relevant. And we do that. We don't have to be doing anything complicated in that process, because we have a very clear pathway in our mind of where we're at, where we're going to, and that's the value we're adding. If we don't do that well, we don't do the needs analysis or the testing well, so we don't have a really clear idea of where we're going. This is when you see guys, I think anyway, where you see guys then trying to create value by bamboozling and just absolute fucking nonsense.
Yeah,
you know,
there's a famous quote. I don't know who it comes from directly, but it's something along the lines of that: if you can't explain something simply enough, you don't understand it well enough. So very often people who have to make things so ridiculously complicated almost probably guarantee that it's because they don't understand it as well as they should do. So they have to try and confuse people, probably subliminally.
I think I mean, the industry, you talked about this to me probably the first time I met you properly, and you talked about the idea of where we've got a problem in the industry with the fitness side of the industry with no clear progression strategies and no structure. And you've referred to martial arts, and I've taken that on. I've stolen that because I like to steal things and pretend that they're mine. And I use that at the moment with the students and saying to them, like, so I'm working with some students who are first years on basic exercise that they will then build into their understanding. It's actually called foundation exercise conditioning because it's their foundation that they'll use further on the line with rehab patients. And they're panicking about, like, oh, I need to be able to do it the way you're doing it. I'm like, no, you don't. You don't need to be, like, in effect, a black belt at this point. You need to not be a white belt anymore. That's the point of the assessment. So if you think of like a belt system, and depending on what martial arts it is, it might go like white, yellow, orange, green, blue, brown, black, or whatever. You only need to be yellow at this point because it's your first assessment. So don't stress about being black right now. Well, that's where the fitness industry is knackered, isn't it? Because initially, everyone who gets in as a personal trainer, the minute they get their qualification, is advertising saying, I am a black belt. And they want to charge black belt money, and they want to be respected as if they are a black belt. And I'm sure we were the same. So we're old now, so we'll now bitch and moan about those people doing that. We were the same because there was no structure when we were that age either. No. So it is problematic, and it leads you to, as I've got more into other things and other things have come up, one of the opportunities I got earlier this year, which was ACE, was because of the COVID crisis and the needing help for the NHS. I did some NHS support work because my current regulator have a profile within the NHS to some degree. And there's a banding system, a very clear banding system. So if you enter the NHS as a physiotherapist, you enter at band 5. And it doesn't matter how good you think you are relative to other people off your course, you still enter at band 5. That's it. And you have to be promoted to band 6 or band 7 or whatever. And that comes with management responsibility and this, that, and the other. And I think it's like anything else. The strength of that is also its weakness. Does that really recognize talent? Do you get guys getting frustrated and leaving that system to go and work in the private sector because actually they are talented, they are doing a good job, and they're suppressed relative to people who've just been there longer? Yeah, that probably does happen. But I think in many ways it's a better situation than the kind of Wild West situation we've got in the fitness side. And I mean, we're all a sort of outcome of our own experiences today, aren't we? So a lot of the places that I've been attracted to and spent time are a little bit out there. But you know, one of the massive problems we've got in the fitness industry is basically people who like fitness are people who are there to try and assist other people who probably don't like fitness. That's why they need help with it. They don't want to engage with it. So a lot of the time, we've got the worst possible people trying to help others because they can't relate to them. So you've got like 20-year-olds who are fit in shape, possibly using gear, trying to train people who are middle-aged, you know, people who haven't really engaged with exercise and need to be met at a level they understand. So it's a young industry, isn't it? There's a lot that probably needs to develop, but these are some of the things that I see as being problematic. We could do with a workforce that represents our potential client base better.
Massively. And when you look at it that pragmatically and you just look at it that simply, it's no wonder that things don't work as well as they could do or as well as they should do, because you've got this mismatch of the type of person who is becoming a personal trainer very quickly for possibly the wrong reasons, that they were possibly missold their expectations of the industry and what's going to happen. They're going to earn 80 grand a year as of a week after completing their course, when actually the reality of it is your most common demographic of client is 35, 55, female, usually more often than not, who's probably got no end of psychological kind of mindset issues, battles with things they've tried, everything under the sun, and it's worked, then it hasn't. And now they have this very difficult relationship with health, fitness, their self, their own mind and their own body. and you've got a 22-year-old who's fucking ripped to shreds, who does nothing but hit workouts and thinks if you limp out of the gym, like barely able to carry your car keys, that he's done a good job of beasting you, and then wonders why you don't turn up to book another 10 sessions like next month when they run out.
Or again, from my point of view, like we just have no understanding that actually when people are motivated, that in itself is a risk to hurting them, because the volume of activity should be changing gradually so they don't hurt themselves. And it doesn't matter how good their mechanics are or how good their form or technique is or how good you are at teaching form or technique. If you go from doing nothing to doing 3 HIIT classes a week every week, within a month or two, you're going to get hurt, because that's just the nature of how long it takes you to physically adapt and the different speeds of adaptation of different tissues. And it's just how it works. But we don't teach that. That's not to personal training. We just teach, yeah, that's great. January, let's get everyone beasted. And the ones that fall away because we've hurt them, well, they may never come back, but that's what we did. Yeah, it's difficult. It's difficult. And the mindset thing you talk about, that's really problematic as well. Because again, I also feel like we have problems there as an industry, because I am really not okay with seeing personal trainers, people who are drug users and aren't declaring it, also posting up about bloody mindset. It's like, whoa, that is so far outside your scope of practice. This is not okay. Yeah. And we have a real issue there, and it's how we tackle that, because there is definitely a place for people to be working with other people at level 3, relatively low levels of qualifications. And we need that. We do need that. That's definitely part of the industry. But if that person does have some difficulties with their relationship with exercise or their relationship with food, what are our referral pathways like? And is anyone taking any responsibility for trying to support that? And because it's self-employed, even in most of the big chains to a great degree, even when they're technically employed, you're so sort of commission driven. People don't want to give up a client because it's an opportunity. I'm going to make money and I need that money. And yeah, I mean, healthcare is a private thing. It's challenging all round ethically. There's a lot of problems. And yeah, I'm not okay with people saying I'm a mindset guy, I'm a mindset guru, I'm a mindset coach, I do mindset. It's like, whoa, what's your actual training? Who is regulating you? You've decided you're good at this, and you've decided you're going to self-regulate. That's not really okay. But again, I don't know the answer. I'm not suggesting I do, but it is difficult, and I would like to engage with. I'm starting this process a little bit with some of the big chains around whether it's their responsibility to get some people within their own sites who have got a high level of competency, qualification, insurance, regulation, who the trainers in their own site can refer to without losing the client. Because that's something that organically happened for me. It organically happened that for a whole myriad of reasons, I decided I needed to go and get some other quals and some other registrations so that I could diagnose injury. Because if I can't diagnose musculoskeletal injury, everything I was doing was in a grey area, and I don't like grey areas. So let's check out, it's charging. Yeah. So I went off and did that, and that actually led to this really weird sort of sales thing where a lot of the other trainers in the area were happy to send their clients to me for one-off appointments because they're comfortable. I wasn't going to say, no, you're now my client. I would send them back, but I would also, with the client's permission, communicate with them, and I would be positive about them continuing to exercise. Whereas if they referred them to a passive therapist, like the fucking devil, like a chiropractor, then they would basically be told they couldn't exercise, so they would lose that client, so that the chiropractor could tell them that they were going to die if they didn't have 12 weeks of chiropractic 3 times a week. So it created it actually created a lot of business for me, but it got me thinking, well, actually, why don't we have this? If you've got all the big chains, an awful lot of them have got like a treatment room, and they've got somebody informally in that treatment room, but they've got no real relationship with the club or the chain. They've got no vested interest to act as part of a team. But that could be amazing. So really, is it down to the big chains to say we're going to have our personal trainers, but we should also have, say, some sports rehabilitators, maybe one or two in each site, depending on the size of the site. We're actually going to have somebody who is a dietitian or a state registered nutritionist, somebody who's registered with the ISSN or something like that, and has some competency for working with people with a poor relationship with food. Somebody who has some competency for working with eating disorders or whatever. We're going to have that person available, even if it's on a part-time basis, who can be available to our lower level or standard levels. Lower level is not fair, but our standard level PTs and coaches. So we do have a referral pathway. And then we've got somebody who's a bit more competent, because don't get me wrong, the buck doesn't stop with me. If I get somebody who comes in and they've got some real serious issues and they don't initially respond to what I think they should musculoskeletally, I refer them on to the doc, because it's like, well, if they've got some kind of vascular issue or they've got some like nerve symptoms that aren't responding the way I expect them to normal musculoskeletal interventions, that's beyond my scope. So I recognize that. And they go to the doc and they get further investigations, but they go with their referral letter and everything else. And whether that's the kind of thing that we possibly need the chains to start looking at, because they could do that. It's whether or not they see that as useful for their business.
Yeah, does it make them enough money? That's the bottom line for them, isn't it? And this is something that we talk about probably most weeks now, don't we, Josh? We talk about with most guests about, first and foremost, knowing your limitations, like staying in your lane, not pretending to be able to do everything because nobody can, and trying to encourage PTs to start to develop a network, preferably locally, but I suppose in the current climate, a lot of people are working online. It doesn't necessarily have to be geographically local, but to develop a network of people that you can refer out to that then is reciprocated. I've done this for years. When I was PTing full time, I had a great relationship with a lady who was, I think she's both an osteo and a chiro, and I do believe she used to lecture on like AMP and stuff as well. So she knew her stuff and she was really good. And I used to get clients who were maybe working with me who would be like, oh, I can't train this week because I've got a bad knee and I'm going to see the doctor. And I'll be like, no, please don't go and see the doctor and tell him you've got a bad knee, because he will say, don't do anything. Give your knee a month's rest. Don't do anything other than walking. Definitely don't go to the gym, because that's all he knows how to stop a knee from hurting. Take some anti-inflammatories and don't do anything. I was like,
yeah, and this isn't being disrespectful to doctors.
You what, sorry?
I mean, I wouldn't want their job. And this isn't being disrespectful to the doctors. I mean, I wouldn't want their job. I absolutely would not want their job. And there's some docs, some GPs who want to work in sport on the same masters, and they do work in sport, and I still have a good relationship with them. And occasionally they'll give me a little bit of a bollocking for something I might say online that is disrespectful to them. But you've got to think, like, the pressure they're under, their issues are actually, if they get something wrong, how many people do they see a day?
Yeah.
It's a lot. And if somebody dies because they made the wrong call, they're potentially liable. So, and they are actually dealing with people who might die if they get it wrong. So somebody who comes in with a sore knee is a pretty low level issue for them, and they haven't got much time. So erring on the side of caution, yeah, I get that. It's not, at the end of the day, you need to sort of rest it for a bit.
They don't want that person coming back 4 weeks in a row with a bad knee, do they? So it's easier just to say, don't do anything that's going to make it worse. Take these anti-inflammatories and then don't go to the gym. Like I get that. But so my argument that I'll try to give the client is to say, listen, go and spend 40 quid to let a professional diagnose why the knee is hurting, because it doesn't just start hurting for no reason whatsoever. You haven't banged it. There's no trauma. You haven't had an accident. It's just started hurting. So clearly there's something that needs addressing. Go and see a professional who will diagnose it. She's bloody busy as well. So if she can see you in one session rather than 4, she will, because she's got a lot of people to fit in. But then she's going to call me, as long as you give her approval to do so. She's going to ring me and say, I've seen Barbara. She's got this problem. I think this is the main source of the problem. She needs to do this, this, and this, and don't do this, this, or this. No problem. So now I can continue working with that client for the next 4, 6, 8 weeks I just need to modify her programming to take into consideration what the professional has told me, rather than taking my minuscule understanding of injury diagnosis and throwing shit at the wall and guessing what works.
What you're underselling there, and this is important, is you're underselling there, one, your ability to identify that that's the right course of action. Two, the level of respect that you've clearly developed with that medical professional, who also trusts that you can understand what she says and do that. And I think that's also part of the issue, that relationship building is difficult and maybe takes time and takes a little bit of confidence. And a lot of medical professionals, in fairness, probably don't have a lot of faith in the fitness industry. Quite rightly, we've done that to ourselves as an industry.
Yeah.
So won't engage in that, and it's trying to break that down. And to be honest, I mean, I'm going to sound like a poster boy type, sandwich board guy here, but this is where the people I'm registered with now are BASRAT. So BASRAT's the British Association of Sports Rehabilitators, and I didn't really know who they were. I came across them when I was looking for how I got an increased scope of practice, but in a way that actually interested me, because I don't want to be a physiotherapist. I don't want to be somebody who treats people passively. I like the gym. I like exercise. I like being proactive. I like training. I like physical proactive rehab, and that's where BASRAT are at. Because essentially, some people go, oh, well, I'll go off and do my UKSCA or whatever and become a strength and conditioning coach, and they do rehabilitation. It's like, well, they don't really, because ultimately, if you can't diagnose a medical condition, you need your hand holding at least through the early stage of rehabilitation, because you don't know anything about injury pathology. So to my mind, what we need people who are very competent in terms of fitness training, exercise, proactive rehab, S&C, but can diagnose. So that to me is what BASRAT provides me with. And although in the program you do have to do some passive therapy, and you do have to show competency for passive therapy to get competent and registered, I don't really do any now. Very little, tiny little bits. That's it. A little bits that might facilitate doing something more proactive. But the problem from the fitness injury perspective is, if somebody comes in like you're saying, says I've got a sore knee, essentially you have to, if you're ethical, say, okay, well, we're not going to train lower body. We're not going to do anything with it because I don't know what to do. If you can just get that little, I say little, but it isn't. But if you can get that little box ticked that goes, actually, you can do clinical assessment and you can diagnose, boom, you can decide there and then what your course of action is going to be. You can document that. You can keep those records. You can modify it depending how it responds. And all of your actions are ethical and insurable and within your scope of practice. So I do think there's certainly, I would like more people to be aware of them as an organisation and aware of it as a potential opportunity. And on the flip side, one of the things that I'm trying to do with the university I'm working for at the moment is trying to get them to engage with the fitness industry more, to give people from the fitness industry the opportunity. Because I think there's an awful lot of people out there who are good personal trainers who don't get a level of recognition and respect they should, who will be absolutely capable of completing either a bachelor's and or a master's degree in the area, and at the moment don't know the pathway to take to do that, to one, do it in a relevant area and what they actually want to do, and two, whether they would run up against what I did to a degree, where people just dismiss them. No, you're a personal trainer. You don't have the right background. So I'm hoping that we can build that, or at least start to build that pathway a little bit, because I think that I tried myself when I finished the masters. This is how I met Josh. I tried to start doing some training courses that would help people be. I felt like I was doing a good thing. I would help it would make them better at what they did. But unfortunately, what I ran into is, if you're not part of a larger organisation, you can't regulate. You're not a regulator, and you don't have the capacity to do that. And actually, it's not ethical for you just on your own to do that. So it created some problems, because I would create an output that then we're operating with a slightly increased scope of practice that an insurance company were backing, but it was all kind of based on my say so. And it ran me into some ethical problems where I was like, oh shit, actually, I'm not sure whether this is okay. So I stopped doing that and moved away from that, because again, my choices were either I carried on doing it and just ignored the ethical implications, or I wound the course down to a level where I basically bullshitted people and said, yeah, it's a really good course, really useful for increasing your skill set, but it doesn't increase your scope of practice at all. In which case, why would I take money off them for it? And that's where I feel like level 4 S&C's at. I'm like, is that really a good program? Is that really worth thousands of pounds? Because although there might be some good content, nobody's getting to work within professional sport with a level 4 S&C's. They're not. It's just not the standard. So unless you've got a bachelor's, probably a master's degree, and either UKSCA or an SCA, CSCS, these sorts of certificates that are recognised in that sector, you are not going to take a level 4 SimSpa or Rex recognised S&C and parlay that into working at Man United. It's not going to happen. So to my mind, it's being missold, and we're taking advantage of people with that. And I think there's a few providers on the almost faux therapy side doing the same thing, convincing people that they're gonna, and that's okay if it forms part of their progression into something else potentially. But unfortunately, what I found with it is the people you attract are wanting you to tell them that they are now something different, they are now something else, they are now some form of clinician, which you can't do. So to me, that became a problem in terms of mis-selling. It became I don't want to be telling people I'm making them a clinician, because I'm not. I don't want to even be indicating I'm doing that and taking money off them, because that's not really okay. And I really had a problem with the people coming onto it, who I was then having to pin back because they were getting on LinkedIn and offering out physiotherapists about whether they should do this or that. And I'm like, oh shit, not in my name. But how many people can I do that for, because I'm not a regulator? So I think for me, the sort of way forward for the industry isn't necessarily for us to create more of our own qualifications. It's for us to create better relationships with things that already exist and better pathways. Because actually, one of the massive strengths that we've got is that the three of us in this conversation have spent a lot of hours in the gym with people and have an awful lot of like empirical understanding of how people move and what things we've come across, which gives you a frame of reference. So it actually makes you a phenomenal candidate to go and do higher level training qualifications, because you understand already a load of things you've come across. And then when somebody says this, and this, you go, yes, that makes sense. Whereas actually the kids I'm getting in first year at university who've come off a college course don't have any of that. So they don't have that that frame of reference. So it's really, really hard to get them. It's almost like you're putting the cart before the horse. It's almost like, for me, I think and obviously I'm biased, but I think the best possible preparation you could have to go and do a degree in something like sports rehab is to have had to work for 5 years as a PT. Because then when you come on, you already know a lot of foundational stuff. You've already seen a lot of problems that you can't quite get all the dots to link up. And then you can understand how they do link up when someone tells you. So I think that's better for us.
Yeah, massively so. I've got a question, and it's kind of linked to a couple of things you've just said in the last few minutes. People will know that you work with a lot of athletes, some very high profile athletes that you've worked with that you probably don't talk about as much as you should, but I'll get onto that later. And you've made it crystal clear that you have worked with a lot of sort of normal clients. So when it comes to working with athletes, either professional, semi-professional, amateur, just some form of athlete, and working with a client, what are the similarities in your approach to working with those two different types of people? And also, what are the differences in your approach between the two?
So I think the process essentially is exactly the same. Exactly the same. So that is exactly what we were just talking about. You start with like the needs analysis. You ask them subjectively. You sit down and have that chat with them. You actually get to know them. You get to know them as a person. You get to know what they actually want. You get to know why they've come to see you, why they're interested. Then that subjective leads you to the objective. You take them into the gym essentially and do some form of fitness testing, which may be formal or pretty informal, to be honest. But to give you an idea of They're saying this is where they want to be. So I need to know where they're at so I can build a process to get them from one to the other, assuming it's realistic. And there's no real difference there. I think the difference in approach is more down to the personal support kind of thing, the level you can meet them at, how much they're going to take out of you in terms of motivation. Because if you're working with an athlete, a lot of the time it's very ego driven, but generally speaking, to have got to the position they've got to, they already understand exercise, they already train, they already turn up and do it. So if you give them a few other things to do alongside what they're already doing, as long as you can get them to understand why it'll be beneficial for them, they'll do it. They just have to understand enough of how it links to their outcome to buy into it. So you ain't going to get a strong man to stand on one leg if he doesn't get what's going to make him win something, because he's going to feel like a fool and he's laughed at other people in the gym for doing that. So if you're going to get him to do something a little bit out there, they need to understand how that links to their outcomes. I think when you're working with Gen Pop or people who don't like the gym so much, there's a lot more, similar sort of thing, I suppose, of getting them to understand why they need to do this and how it links to their outcomes. But some of it is starting them off in a really, really non-intimidating way and getting them to do things that are pretty simple and basic and not embarrassing them. But it comes down to the individual. Sometimes they actually need that, and that sounds awful, but I can remember a lady that I ended up with a really good relationship, still got a good relationship with her, and she'd come in because she'd been told by a doctor she needs to exercise, but she was quite almost confrontational because she was obviously uncomfortable with it, and then wanted to say what she was and wasn't prepared to do training wise. And I'd say, well, I want you to do this, and I'm not doing that. Like, well, I think it'd be really helpful. And they're saying, well, I don't. So I made her get on the floor, and when she couldn't get up, I didn't help her up, and I left her, and she had to crawl across to a bench and help herself up. And obviously that's quite extreme, but this had developed over a few weeks, and we were at a point where I felt this may be appropriate. And it turned out, touch wood, in that case, we ended up with a really good relationship of it. But she had to feel why I'm saying to her, yeah, no, you can't stand on a treadmill and walk on a treadmill because you can already walk. You can't do other things. I need you to be able to do those things. That's why your doctor sent you here. So I think a lot of it comes down to the individual and their individual needs, which brings you back to the needs analysis. But it's maybe more different in terms of what they will need mentally as opposed to what they're going to need physically. The person who's a patient population might just need help in consistently getting to the gym, being in the gym, understanding that it's going to be helpful for them until they feel that it's helpful for them, and then they buy in. You've got quite a long period, haven't you? Because if it takes, several weeks for them to actually feel any different, you've really got to keep them committed for that period of time, haven't you? Whereas if you're working with an athlete, they go to the gym, it's their habit already. So there's an awful lot of commonality, but the differences, to some extent individual, but probably more down to the we've talked about this loads, haven't we? The things that really matter: adherence, consistency, the things that actually make a difference. If you're already a decent level athlete, generally speaking, at least to a decent degree, you've already nailed consistency and adherence. Your beginners, that's where you've got to start, isn't it? Because you can give them the best technical input in the world, but if they're not going to turn up and do it because they don't understand the value of it and they don't want to, well, there's no point, is there?
No, you're preaching to the converted there. I just sometimes I think that a lot of PTs maybe see that working with a professional athlete is sort of, for a lot of people, is like the holy grail of something to aspire to from a personal training status. And I think a lot of people sometimes think that something will have to change, and the way that those athletes approach their training is miraculously different to what Fred and Barbara are doing with me in the gym. And although there are differences, there's probably way more similarities between what they're doing. And caveat to that, I've worked with a lad who's an ice hockey player since he was 14, 15, and he's now 22, 23-year-old, elite level, GB international, and he works off the exact same programming that my clients would work with in the gym. It is identical, other than his progressions may go slightly quicker, his weights might be slightly heavier, and some of the complexity of some of the exercises might be slightly bigger. But essentially, there's way more similarities than there are differences between what he's doing as a professional athlete at the fucking top of his game in British ice hockey compared to 45-year-old mum of two who's got very little gym experience.
Well, it's interesting as well because, again, this brings you all the way back to the needs analysis of going, well, you're a smart guy. So you've identified that actually your program for him, because he's an ice hockey player, is not mimicking ice hockey, but using a barbell instead of a hockey stick, which we might laugh at the idea of, but essentially that's what you see people doing. It's like, well, he's a hockey player, so what I'm getting to do is I'm getting to do multiplanar lunges whilst holding one end of the barbell and swinging it, because that's going to make him stronger for hockey specifics. It's like, he goes hockey training, and that's what he does to get better at hockey. We need to break down what are the physiological responses we need to support him being a more athletic hockey player. What specific range of movement may he need to strengthen to make him a more robust and more capable hockey player? But none of that necessarily means that any of his movements are going to look anything like ice hockey. We're breaking the needs down, what we do in the gym. And actually, when we look at that, like we said, an awful lot of those are going to be very similar, just at a higher level, to the needs of a normal person, because hockey's, a multi-directional sport, a little bit like life for a little old person. So actually, a lot of the things that they're going to do to be able to, change direction, accelerate, decelerate, are the same things that you're going to do to avoid falling over if you're an old deer. Mm-hmm. So it's just a case of he'll be doing much bigger range of movement, much more velocity, and more load, and they'll be doing rotations. So, same physical outcomes we need. So why would the program look massively different?
Cool. On that note, we look at I've recently started to talk a lot about GPP and a more generic method of programming. So if you compare that to specific training, and I've ruined my life for years on end trying to make every single program for every single client different, just for the sake of being different to every other program that everyone else has had, and it's made my life hell. So when it comes to generic programming and specific program, when is it appropriate to use either, and also when would it be inappropriate to use either?
I think that needs to be looked at more like a matrix, doesn't it? And I think that's what you're also already doing and already talking about. Because again, you've been at this a long time and you're good at it. But essentially, you could be specific to that person in terms of exercise selection, or you could be specific to that person in terms of the load. So you might choose an exercise, and I've been really critical, mainly just to be a bell end and be a bit obnoxious, really. But I've been really critical about our back squats, openly and vocally, just because it offends people and it creates some discussion. And it's not because I've never used them. It's because they are overused. They are massively overvalued and massively overused, because people who like training like squatting, and then they want to promote it to other people, not because it necessarily is the holy grail. And you might choose to barbell back squat with a whole range of different clients. That's absolutely fine. You might just make the load and the set and rep schemes specific to where they're at and where their needs are. Or you might look at it and go, well, actually, for lower body development, this person doesn't need it to be bilateral, doesn't need it to be, an axial compressive loading. So they can actually do lunge patterns, and that is going to be perfectly adequate for their needs, and it's going to be more relevant to the way that they move generally. So that's what I'm doing. Or you might do a mixture of both. And again, I think that comes back to, and I sound boring now, but that comes back to you doing an appropriate needs analysis. I don't think one's necessarily right or wrong. I think we've got to look at it and go, if you're looking at group environments like strength training for a group, it's perfectly acceptable to say they're all doing the same exercise. I was looking to spend a little bit of time at Hull Kingston Rovers, and their strength and conditions, so this is Super League, Rugby League, it's about as brutal as you're going to get in terms of a contact sport. They did some really interesting stuff, but strength-wise, they basically did 4 movements, 2 sessions a week, about 40 minutes each. the warm-ups had some slightly specific stuff in it to that person's sort of injury history or position, but their main lifts were the same for everybody. And one week it was, one session A, it'd be trap bar deadlifts and dumbbell floor presses. And session B would be barbell power cleans and pull-ups. And that was basically the 4 big movements they did, and that was it. Because the argument being that the amount of time that they're spending doing rotational work, doing multiplanar stabilizing and stuff out in the field, unless they've got some sort of injury need that means they need to now bring up a deficit, that base strength in those simple movements will cross over to what they're doing because the amount of other training they're doing out there. And this is one of my little sort of pet theories at the minute, is whether on-season and off-season training is what should look very different for your athletes who compete, because whilst they're out there getting the impact on the field, they probably need to not have impact. So things like Olympic lifts, where there's an impact in the catch phase that is often argued as, that's why we do full Olympic lifts, because we want that impact, eccentric loading, we want to teach them to decelerate a load, blah blah. So they're doing that on the field, they're doing that in training. So don't do that. During the season, do explosive movements that you don't have to decelerate very much. Do that. Yet when it comes to the off season, then there might be an argument you flip it the other way and you do the stuff that replaces the things happening on the field. So it's the context thing again, isn't it? Looking at the bigger picture and going, how does this fit into the bigger picture? So thinking of your ice hockey player, you might do a load more mad, multi-directional, like explosive acceleration, deceleration stuff, like real dynamic lunge type, plyo type stuff in his off season if he's skating less. But if you do that on season when he's also skating in anger in games, you run the risk of giving him overuse and overload injuries as a result. So it kind of all depends where it sits in their overall program. But if anything, we just need to kind of consider, am I looking to get a physiological response from this exercise? I.e., if you put somebody under a barbell back squat and you want to argue that's functional, you're full of shit, because how would the load ever get up there without a squat rack? So it is not a functional movement. That's complete crap. But it does crush you. And if you want to stimulate physiological change, the sensation of being crushed to death is a pretty clear signal to your body to change. So that has a benefit, and I get that. So for some people, that's going to be helpful. Like I'm thinking rugby is a very obvious application of barbell back squatting forwards in rugby union. Outside of that, you maybe don't need that and you can do something simpler. Or you might do an exercise that has actual movement specific functionality type crossover, but it sits on a spectrum, doesn't it? And the more it looks like the sport you're doing, the less it's giving you physiological overload and the more it's giving you the risk of overuse. So where on that spectrum you put things, like I say, depends what else you're doing in your bigger program. I try and avoid a lot of impact stuff with my runners because they're getting the impact out doing their mileage. But we can use exercises that make them more resistant to impact overuse injuries without impact, which will be some fairly slow, heavy strength loading work. I can't just go, right, okay, we'll go out and run wearing this weighted vest, that'll make you stronger, which is one of the like sort of old school mentalities where you're like, okay, brilliant, yeah, just break them. All depends on it.
It does depend. Josh, since you're still alive after your brush with death in the fire alarm, I've hijacked a few of your line of questioning, mate. I do apologise, but you were AWOL. Do you want to pick up from where you left off? I do have one more question, but it's like got 3 tiers and it's quite long-winded, so I'll save it till the end.
So first of all, let's not mention tiers because that's a bit of a rough subject at the moment.
Your point.
For a lot of people. So I'm going to go down a slightly different route now because this is a question I'm going to start asking everyone, I think, that comes on the podcast. But if you were to open a gym at the moment, if you had an unlimited budget and you were going to open a facility mainly based around kind of your functional training / rehab, prehab sort of role, what equipment would you go for?
Can I answer that as well afterwards?
Yes.
I owned a gym for a while, and I think the 50th time I refitted the same toilet seat because everyone else claimed they couldn't do it, I decided I would never own a gym again. So I probably wouldn't go down that route actually again. But I have got a gym in the garage, and in there I have got a rack, which is actually my wife's really, more than mine. But I've got a rack, a 7-foot barbell. I've got 200.
There's a joke in there somewhere, but we'll.
My wife was Britain's strongest woman last year in the Masters class.
Don't tell her that I'm making a joke about her rack.
Yeah, so we just let her do whatever she wants and leave her be. But yeah, we have got a squat rack. We've got a 7-foot ollie barbell. We've got some bumpers, and then we've got enough plates to get to about 250, maybe 300 kilos in combination of stuff. And then I've got kettlebells 8 to 44, and we've matted the floor, and that's it. Oh, we have some spare mats that you can stack and create some slightly different height rises, but that's it. That's a lot.
Is there anything that you think is kind of underrated but not that accessible? So, for example, what I mean is like mace training or club bells. Do you think any of that's like? Is there anything that stands out that more people should probably be using?
I've got a mace, and I do quite like it, and I play about with it occasionally. But again, I think the difficulty with that is that it is detail stuff, really, and you get into a situation where people want to identify as something and something different, and you start to come away from like the priorities of right needs analysis. What does this person actually need? And they start going the wrong way, and they start going, here's a tool, how can I use it with everyone? And everyone will know in the gym will know me as cool mace guy, and then I'll just do all my training with a mace. And that to me is the risk. So it's not that it's necessarily not a great tool, it's just that I think we need to be better at teaching people how to identify what people's needs are, and then different ways of doing that. This is one of the big mistakes I made with my own training courses. One of the things I did is I tried to answer the question in full, which then meant that I gave people like a potted answer. But I think it led to them missing the point too many times. And what I just probably need to do is get more understanding of this is one answer. There's loads. As long as the analysis at the start, the assessment was sound, you can choose which way you do it. And if you want to increase range of movement by using foam roller or massaging, or you want to do it by stretching, I don't care, but just try and do some strength work through that range once you've got it to try and actually do something useful with it. And again, I couldn't anyway because of the PTs. So yeah, I try and avoid advocating sort of single-use tools too much.
Okay, makes sense. So Mark, same question for you.
Mate, I would go minimalist as fuck. So I would go like good solid rubber flooring, wall to wall. I would have some wall-mounted pull-up bars along one side that could all have suspension stuff hanging off them if you need it, that can be tucked away. Other suspension systems are available. I
forgot that. I have got gymnastic rings.
Yeah, rings and suspension straps and whatnot. I would then, along one wall, I would have dumbbells standing on their ends. I wouldn't bother with a rack. I'd just have them stand on the floor. Like I'd have 4 pairs of 5 kilos, 10s, 15s, 20s, 25, 30. On the other side, I'd go kettlebells from 8 through to 32, like probably 2 pairs of each. And then I'd have a box with stuff like resistance bands and shit like that in it. And I think that would be it for the general, assuming it's going to be for general public. But even if you had high-end athletes in there, yes, it would be a lovely thing to add. In my place, I had 3 squat racks in there, and I loved them. I used them every hour of every day. But did I have to have them? Probably not. And if I was looking at about 60 grand was the total to get out my place, whereas if I did it in the way I've just said, I reckon you could probably do it for about 6.
Yeah.
And that's a big fucking difference. And if you look at the amount of money I could save, the amount of more space I could have, the amount of more stuff I can do with an open space compared to what I would lose from what I wouldn't be able to gain because I can't do a 140 kilo back squat. I don't think it would be enough. I think I would gain more than I would be losing. If I got to a point whereby I then had a bit more money to spend, I would probably chuck in a couple of these wall-mounted squat racks, like open and close, bars stored against the wall, plates stored in the wall, and I'd keep as much floor space free and open as possible. Because chuck a squat rack in, yeah, you might be able to do 100 things with a squat rack, but with 4 meters square of empty space, you can do a fucking million things. So I would go minimalist.
Very nice. Very nice.
What would you do? What would you have in your place?
Well, so my office is also my gym at the moment.
Yeah.
So I've got as I showed you earlier, I've got a wall-mounted pull-up bar there, which is like a super sturdy one because I am super fucking heavy at the moment, and it's only going to get worse over Christmas. Then I've got the suspension system. I've got various resistance bands for helping with pull-ups and rotator cuff stuff and whatever. I've got some parallettes over there, which I'm actually getting rid of, but I would also have something like that. And then I've got kettlebells ranging from 12 to 40. I just need to bring them in. I've only got the 224s here. And I'm 3 stories up, so bringing them in is going to be a pain. Farmers carries. So yeah, I think I would have some kettlebells. I would have, and this is only for me, to be honest. I'd have suspension, kettlebells, pull-up bar, and then I do a lot of bodyweight stuff at the moment as well, like half Hindus and all that sort of stuff. And then I guess if there were going to be if there's going to be any clients here, I would probably get a fold-away squat rack as well, like you said. I think that's pretty much.
It's interesting though, because if you take the 3 of us. It is kind of interesting because I think this is not just normal, but also how I actually developed a business and got to work with some high level people. I just think that naturally, I bet between us, the 3 of us, have spent an awful lot of time under a bar or deadlifting a bar or power cleaning a bar or doing basic barbell stuff. But once you've actually got a reasonable base foundation level where, for a man, you can back squat bodyweight and a half or whatever, and it's not amazing, but it's not awful. You do kind of lose a bit. It's so one-dimensional and actually a bit boring that as long as you've got that, you do kind of lose interest. You do get more interest in other things and things that are a bit more sort of multiplanar and dynamic. And I do wonder whether the only slight sort of caveat to that is that we should make sure we're not overly encouraging beginners to get more distracted with more complexity before they have a foundation and disregard the fact that the 3 of us probably did build that foundation first.
Yeah.
Mark, are you going to tell me you didn't?
I didn't what?
Build that? Because I remember you saying that you actually got into doing some different weird stuff early doors because you did find barbell stuff boring. But I'm assuming you still did a fair amount for a while.
Yeah, I came into the industry for the wrong reasons, really. I didn't come into the industry because I loved training and because I had so much experience of training in a gym. So when I was learning how to do a back squat on my course and stuff like that, or a bench press, what have you, that was like the first time I'd ever touched a bar and a rack and a bench in my life. So to me, it was then very easy come, easy go. And do you know what? We were given a task. One of my tutors, when I was on my level 3 course with Future Fit, and the tutor basically asked us this question. He's like, right, everyone, get a piece of paper. You've got an unlimited budget. I want you to plan the ultimate facility that you can. So there's people like fucking drawing it all out with squat racks and power plates and fuck knows what else. And he was like, now I just want you to write a program for someone to do that is going to be like your facility, all singing, all dancing, and I want you to write a program that is like the best program that can be done in that facility. So fuck me, every variation you can imagine, everyone's writing it down. And I don't know whether it was because of my naivety, because I didn't know that much about gym environments and I hadn't been exposed to them that much, or I didn't know whether it's because I kind of cottoned on, or by luck, I think it was, I kind of guessed where he was going with this. While everyone's writing it down, the guy then walks around and gives everybody one of these little Reeboks latex rubber tubes, you know, like with the little triangular handles on each end. So he gave everybody one of those, and he was like, right, now I want you to coach the person next to you. That workout that you've just written, I want you to coach them through that workout, but only using this resistance band. And everyone was like, oh, fuck. How the fuck am I going to do that? And I was like, fuck it, I get it. I get this, because my program that I've written and the layout that I've drawn was so fucking simple that it was so easy to apply it to the tool that he had given us. And it just kind of like a light bulb went off, like someone flicked a switch in my head. I was like, I get it. It's not necessarily about the apparatus. It's about what you do with it. I was like, I get it. And
it's
I was
about
looking
understanding. And again, you're back to needs analysis, because that exact thing you've described, is one of the activities we were doing with the first years, where we'd teach them these basic exercises. Then we'd go through like a set of variations for the basic exercises. Then we'll do the needs analysis section. We're going, right, so we've got a footballer, then we've got a rugby player, then we've got and we do like going through to try and teach them to understand exercise selection and different, simple things that they should be able to do, where you're going like, so actually, for the rugby player, they probably are going to want to barbell back squat if they're a forward, because they're going to need that axial compressive load. That's going to be helpful for them. But for the football player, the soccer player, they don't need that, because they're not scrummaging, they're not rucking and mauling. They don't need that. So teach them something simpler, that they can get strength work out right away, and blah, 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 on. And that was the exact red herring at the end. You've got one resistance band, now design me a workout. And every single person in the room, once they were given this resistance band, came up with all these different things you could do with the resistance band. And they're like, who the fuck is this for? Did anybody think at any point to say, who is this for? I know I've only got a resistance band, but who's it for? And nobody had, literally. Because as soon as you said this is the equipment, they focused. And it brings us back to what we were saying to you, Josh, about single-use tools. As soon as you told them what equipment they had, they became obsessed with the equipment. Yeah. And the other thing that happened is not a single person, once you gave them the resistance band, they got focused on problem solving with this resistance band. Not a single person did a bodyweight variation. So you'd said, oh, you've got a resistance band, and you've got them doing these horrible fucking like squats with the fucking band around the neck. Yet nobody just did like a split squat without the fucking band, so that they got benefit from that. And you bob on, you're absolutely bob on. It's the same thing, isn't it? We're back to right, decent needs analysis, context, and then you apply whatever tools you have to it as well as you can. You don't just beat the drum of whatever tool you like or whatever exercise you enjoy doing. That's interesting, Mark.
It's massive, and that it happened to me on sort of day one before I was even let loose on the gym, and I think it was probably easier for me to get my head around it, because I had no bias, I had no likes and dislikes, I had no experience of back squatting. I'd never done it in my life, so of course I didn't have some sort of bias towards making everybody back squat. I love a back squat, don't get me wrong, but in terms of, if you fast forward 10 years after that, then I'm started teaching my functional performance workshops, and that was based on making people better at stuff. So say, right, first thing I'm going to teach you planes of motion so you understand them. Then we're going to teach you movement patterns like knee dominant, hip dominant, push, pull, rotate, anti-rotate, carrying, moving a load, etc. So taught you movement patterns, taught you the sagittal, transverse and frontal planes, and now we're going to try to implement all of that to a medicine ball, to a kettlebell, to a resistance band, to a Swiss ball, to a Reebok deck, to a squat rack, to a barbell, to a plate on its own. And if we understand the underlying principles of what the human body can do, then it becomes so much easier to apply them to whatever tools are available to you. And then you don't have to look like a bell end. Squat rack's busy for our 6 p.m. PT session. So let's just cancel and do next week. Or now I don't know what to do. I'm going to give you a shit session because everything I had.
Well, mate, lockdown was. I wanted to smash my head open every time I opened social media during lockdown, and people trying to use a fucking wheelie bin as a squat rack, and you're like, are you fucking stupid? Have you literally not just realised that the fact you cannot power clean enough load on that barbell to do a meaningful front squat workout means you're either, this is the Dan John thing, you're either too immobile or not explosive enough. So the thing you need to work on isn't the thing you're obsessed with working on. Yeah. You're trying to get this in a place that it doesn't need to fucking be because it isn't your problem.
Yeah.
And going, well, for some people with very specific needs, yeah, okay, they want to go further down that rabbit hole. But the vast majority of people are like, no, you've literally got here a diagnostic tool. If you feel like without a squat rack, you can't train legs, that tells you everything you need to know about how you're going to hurt yourself, how you're going to become immobile, and how you're going to become ill in later life, because you just can't, you're not getting fitter, you're getting more specialist.
Yeah.
And that
like the old bucket of concrete at each end of a broomstick to do my bench press, all that sort of shit.
Can't do a fucking press up, but you just like
so it's sort of I mean that sort of just takes you through like a 10-year journey of where my head is at when it comes to the way I see things and the way I program things. And equipment is great. I love equipment, but 10 years ago, my argument was that if ever, it's great now the gym's open, but if ever something happens and the gym is taken away from you, what the fuck are you going to do if you can only use that tool in that place at that time? Then if that's taken away from you, you're fucked. Lo and behold, look what we've just been through for the best part of the last 9 months. Now you've got gyms in huge parts of the country are shut down. Some shut down forever. Some that probably won't reopen now for the foreseeable anyway, depending on what tier you're in. And you've got more PTs than ever, more coaches than ever having to work online, which is unfavorable to most of them. And you've got the client at the other end of the webcam who's in their conservatory and they've got a fucking tin of baked beans in one hand and a couple of encyclopedias in the other hand. That's all they've got. So if all you can do is give them back squats with an encyclopedia in their hand, you're fucked, because they're never going to elicit any change. But if you understand the principles of movement, progressions and regressions better, then you've got a chance.
Well, this is where, again, the frustration is that for most training providers, we still try and get people through anatomy and physiology as if it's some kind of headache. And we do not relate it to outcomes, and we do not relate it to the exercises, and we don't bridge that gap well enough. And this is something that we're looking at and really trying to hammer home with the degree program for sports rehab, because that really is the you must understand your anatomy and physiology and your anatomy and your physiology in real detail. So you can say exactly what you're saying. You can go, it doesn't matter what kit I've got. This is the physiological outcome I want. These are the tissues that I want to condition. So I can do that with whatever I've got. And yeah, it might be more optimal with one, but this is what you get in lockdown. Yeah, I've got personal trainers people I like, who are friends, who were saying, oh, I'm not really training in lockdown, can you? I'm like, wow. Actually, if you're going to put that out, that's real dangerous, because that's actually saying to the public, I don't know fuck all. It's scary. But you're right, yeah. And I think it's why we do need to hammer home the theory, and we need to get people on board with why the theory is important to underpin. It really is the underpinning knowledge.
Yeah, massively. And we, I think I recorded it back in the summer or something for Josh to have as a product that he'll release in sometime in the new year, I think, Josh. I can't forget when it's scheduled in, but we've put together like a webinar, like all the programming that I've used, the principles of it. So somebody could essentially just buy 12 months worth of programming for less than the cost of a PT session, but it will teach them why everything is where it is and how to progress it, how to regress it, how to chop and change it. So it should save so much of people's time, because all they've got to do is input the things like, where's the person at now? Where do they want to get to? What's their injury history or their background? And it all just falls in, and then just kind of the programming writes itself almost. It makes life so much easier for so many people, but still churns out fucking good quality results at the end. It's why I've sort of deliberately asked you the questions that I've had about generic and specific. Is it appropriate or inappropriate?
It's very important, that, though.
Working with the client.
Well, so when I did level 3, all a while ago now, obviously, the technical component of that was linear periodization, and the idea being that you had to understand the interactions between volume and intensity, and you had to do that across strength training, cardiovascular conditioning, and flexibility, and you had to integrate these things, and you had to do so. There was some actual technical content in terms of program design. Now, whether or not you think 12-week linear periodization is appropriate to gen pop clients isn't the point. It gave you some, if you really bought into it and understood it, it gave you some underpinning knowledge that you could then tinker with because you knew what was going on. Well, that's been dropped. So that's not in the syllabus anymore. So actually, I think that what you're talking about, taking that and giving people that as a template that they can buy as a PT and that they can then use with their clients, is in itself, it's not a lazy thing. That's an education process. They will learn so much to it that they can then take that on and apply. Because unfortunately, as an industry, I think we have let them down by taking things like periodization out of PT.
Yeah,
it's really that's
the value for me is especially for somebody who is in their first year of the job. I mean, that's sort of why I've written it based on like 12 months. So sort of you've just finished your course. Whether you like to admit it or not, you're like a fucking rabbit in headlights. You don't know which way to turn because of all of the social media bollocks that you're exposed to. Here is a 12-month template. All you've got to do is follow it, stick your client in at this end, get them out at this end, and over the course of the year, you'll start to learn to understand why it is the way it is. So then your progress into years 2, 4, 6, 8 will be accelerated, whereas most people
and
have quit within
things
that
we've already
year.
touched on. We talked about you're adding the value by having a plan that you're implementing on their behalf for them to make progress. And that's your value. They actually make progress. And without that, that gets into that problem that we were talking about, Josh, of you focus on tools and you focus on, well, I can teach you how to do this stuff on a fucking BOSU and that'll fill 3 sessions. And then what can I con you with for the next 3 sessions? Because you're not focused on progress. You're not focused on an actual outcome. So I do think that's massively important. I think it's something that ought to be in that template, and those templates ought to be put in PT training. Yeah, you should be selling that to providers because it's what's missing. Because you can't. At the minute, we've now got a situation where we don't give them templates, so there's no template there, and we don't actually teach them the principles anymore because we understood that when we taught them the principles, actually it was too much too soon, and they couldn't get it and they couldn't understand it. So now we don't teach them fucking anything. Now you go, okay, you've now got a level 3 certificate in PT, but you don't have to design a program. You certainly don't have to do it progressively because we've watered it down to just going, well, it needs to be 8 weeks progressive. And the 8 weeks progressive can literally be the same program for 8 weeks. And you just write more load, faster. And that's it.
Yeah. Well, you heard it here first, kids. Save 27 quid of your Christmas money because it'll be, Josh will be probably fast forwarding the release date now to Boxing Day.
100%.
The interesting part is, though, I'd encourage, I'd encourage guys who are experienced to buy it, because for that kind of money, that's, it's less than one session, or it should be less than one session, less than 1 hour's work. And even if you just read through and go, yeah, that confirms, or even yeah, or it gives you some different ideas, well, that actually does represent good value, doesn't it? Because it's practical.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's enough of being nice to Mark. Let's move on quick.
Josh, have you got any other? I've got my last question that I'll finish off with. But Josh, have you got any other quick ones before I do that, and then we'll move on to a bit of masturbating and whatnot?
So yeah, most of my questions have been covered. So my final one is: over the course of your career, do you have any investments that have stuck around as being the most kind of giving you the best return of investment? So like courses, mentoring, that sort of stuff. Is there anything that kind of tops the list?
I don't know really. I think one of the things that I did for a long time. So the first time I worked in a gym was 2002. So when you said, did I do floor hours before PT? It's like, well, yeah, because I first worked in a gym in 2002. I didn't even qualify as PT till 2007, because back then there wasn't even much of an industry for PT. It really wasn't that much of a thing. And it took me a long time to get my head into investing in my own development. It took me a long time of going, well, I can just read what I like reading online, and then that's good enough, and what I'm doing is good enough, and I can defend what I'm doing. And yeah, what took too long to get into that. And what I would say is the trend with the fitness industry, is to try to find new things and to try to find something different and new and different that makes you stand out, and that's how you're going to stand out. And I would say try and turn that on its head, and I would say actually try and go as conventional as possible, which took me a long time to get my head into. And the more recognized, the more mainstream recognized, the more industry recognized things you can do, and then apply them better than anyone else, and get focused on your application as opposed to something different. Because actually the reason that the things that are conventional and traditional and have stuck around a long time have done that is because they are effective, and the person who applies those principles best will be the best at what they do.
Makes sense.
I'll add to that as well. That's where my call it an obsession with like the old school, old time strongman stuff. Just the more I look at it, the better it becomes. Where you're looking at, I'll show you. I just had this delivered yesterday. I bought myself I bought this off eBay. It's like an old Sandow chest expander. I've already got two of them, but I bought this one because it was like the best quality I've seen. So this thing dates back to something ridiculous, like 1915 or something like that. And you've got, even inside it, this piece of paper is like, 150 years old, or 100, so it's over 100 years old, not 150. And it's got like the instructions on how to measure yourself and stuff like that. And in terms of like an online trainer now who needs to know how to get their clients to measure themselves for social distancing and whatnot, mate, there's so much stuff in here that is just so fucking good that
the old time stuff, mate. Like we obviously talked about this a loads, and one of the things that's got me really interested in this again is that's amazing. That is amazing. So I'm having to do a little bit more work at the moment in terms of speed development. One of the things that I've not done that much of in my career is speed running, speed work. But because I'm working with a lot more conventional sports again at the minute, we're doing a lot more stuff in terms of speed. Amazing. So there's been bits of research on stuff like really, really heavy partials for improving speed, because the amount of load you can lift through partial ranges is obviously so much more massive than the load you can lift through full ranges. And of course, your body will self-select those strongest positions when it comes to things like running as fast as possible, because it's not going to put you dead low to the ground where you've got dead massive joint angles, because you can't produce force there. So actually, when your body self-selects like a top quarter squat when you're ego lifting, it's doing that for good reason. Maybe you do need strength in that, because it might make you faster. And that made me think of the rotational stuff, single arm stuff, but they would also do the massively heavy overload stuff as well. Still right there. So like the combination of the windmills, the single arm presses, the snatches, they did fast stuff, they did rotational stuff, they did single limb stuff, and they did massively heavy overload. And they did quite an interesting combination of things, just like intuitively, because they knew that worked.
It's weird, isn't it? Because you often, people say, oh, if it's not broke, don't fix it. But it literally, the results that their training yielded with the stuff that they had available to use, which was very minimalistic, and it worked wonders. It's just through technology, and I get it, like engineering, it's all advanced, and now we have all, like, marketing exists now, and we have all singing, all dancing, like bullshit that people will try and sell you, and it's easy to fall for. But on that note, it's just I look back to some of the old school stuff. It's where the whole underground strength course came from. That Chris, I interviewed you for part of that course, and we've got a good few, I don't know, a fair few dozen people that have done it already, and it's such valuable information to take on. And the looks I used to get when I trained at a Pure Gym in town when it was open, and the looks I used to get when I used to load up 250, 300 kilos onto a bar to do sort of like a quarter of a back squat, like an eighth of a back squat. You could see people looking, thinking, oh, look at that, that's a fucking shit squat. And because they don't understand what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. But the knock-on effect it had to, like, my body was ridiculous, other than being about 2 inches shorter.
But again, like rugby impact stuff, that has a place. Speed stuff, that has a place, and that is it. And yeah, stuff goes full circle, doesn't it? And you go, right, yeah. So a combination of multiple ranges.
With all the stuff, I talked to you about it. I talked to Bud Jeffries, Brooks Kubik, Tom Crudgington, Jeff Capes, and it was the same underlying theme with all of you, that the partials and isometrics work because they strengthen all of the connective tissue. The stronger the connective tissue is, the better the body can perform. So yes, range of movement is fantastic, but also very small range of movement is also equally as fantastic if utilized for the right reasons.
Yeah, exactly that. And you're not going down one rabbit hole and going, I'm only going to do partials, or I'm only going to do, really. So that's like heavy partials is like the antithesis of yoga, isn't it?
Yeah.
And you're like different ends of the spectrum, and it's okay to do bits of both. But if you just do one, and you don't see people just doing heavy partials because it'd be ridiculous, but you do see people who will just do yoga.
Ridiculous, and you heard it here first.
Yeah, careful with that one.
Chris, my final question / questions, and we can go blitz through it a bit quicker than if it came at the start. People say that you can't out-exercise a bad diet. So my question is, to what extent is it possible to out-exercise a bad movement pattern? And I'll just add a caveat to that. My follow-up question would be, what does a good or bad movement pattern even look like? And then my follow-up question to that would be, would it be more appropriate to use the term inefficient movement pattern rather than good or bad? So is it sort of inefficient or efficient for that person doing that thing at that time, rather than this is good, this is bad?
Okay, so I think that links to a little bit to the last question, where your body will self-select its most stable or its strongest, most powerful position. So by trying to alter that, you're kind of going against what your body wants to do. So I think there's a difference between whether you're doing something that is for a performance outcome right then and there, in which case you let it do what it needs to do, which is why like people rounding the back, pulling a max. It's like, well, if it's for a comp and that's the position where you get the most load, that's the outcome you want. It's the risk that you're taking, crack on, or hitching or whatever. Versus what you do in training, where you might want to try and fill in the blanks so that you end up in a situation where you don't go to a potentially risky pattern. Risk basically just comes down to what tissue you're loading. So it comes down to a little bit more understanding, I think. So things like your knees coming in, so knee valgus, we know that your knees coming in increases your risk of ACL rupture in anything where you've got to change direction. So if your habit every time you squat or deadlift or do any kind of lift is for your knees to collapse inwards, that might be somewhat indicative that you have a problem stabilizing the hip and the ankle potentially to keep the knee tracking where you might want it to. So there's numerous different ways you might deal with it. The idea being that you just don't try and ignore it. Now, some people will want to just deal with that by cueing and going, keep your knees out, control the load. Some people will want to try and break it down and find out where that relative weakness exists and address that with assistance work. And I think there's a place for each. But actually, when it comes down to max lifts, if you've just done it by not directly addressing an issue with like assistance work, you've just tried to cue it out and coach it out, it'll normally come back at limit. That's what you tend to see empirically. So I think what we could do to get better at, and it's one of the things that links to all the things we've had so far, is if you see something like that, your anatomy being good enough to potentially range of movement check what might be causing them to go into that range, what isn't available, is it not available at the joint or is it not available through the muscles? Then you can work on trying to make it available. Then you need to work on strength and stability through it. Or if it is available and the person's moving away from it, it's weak in that range, how do you specifically strengthen that range? So it has to become a process, and pretty much everything I've done with all this, and like a credible rehab model will basically start like that, and it'll start saying, is the available active range of movement there? Can they then do isometric stability stuff in that range of movement? Can they then do slow control stuff in that range of movement? Then when we add speed, can they do it faster? Then when we add the need for deceleration, can they do it then? Then when we add it into an integrated pattern with all of those things together in a changed direction, can they do it then? And it's like a spectrum. So I think it comes down to identifying, is that actually a problem, that movement pattern? Because again, if there isn't any evidence that it's an issue, then what's the problem? And I think we have that with like posture and postural defects. Is there any evidence it's really an issue? Not really. So people still selling courses on standing you next to a plumb line, they might have an issue. But we do have some evidence that losing active range of motion does cause problems. So you should be able to assess that and deal with that. And I think that is a bit of a way forward for us as an industry, to be able to at least understand what range of movement should be available, and then that process of being able to stabilize in it, and so on and so forth, that we just kind of went through.
Cool, good answer, Josh. Anything else before we masturbate?
No, I'm ready to go.
Cool. So Chris,
warmed up.
I have a diminishing collection of pieces of paper in my Tupperware with a list of various terms and phrases or whatnot. If you could please pick a hand, any hand.
Your left hand, please, sir.
Of course. Left hand is this piece of paper right here, which is kettlebell.
Fantastic.
So, Chris, you are going to argue against kettlebells. You hate them. They are terrible. Josh, do you fancy going for?
Bring it.
You want Chris to go first, or do you want to go first?
I'll go first.
Cool. So Josh is going to have 60 seconds to tell us why kettlebells are so brilliant. And then Chris, you are going to tell him why you hate them so much. Just let me get my stopwatch. Joshua, are you ready?
I am indeed.
3, 2, 1, mass debate.
Okay, so why do I love kettlebells? Why do I have a hard-on for the bells of steel? So number one, they're portable. So I can take a kettlebell with me if I'm going camping, if I'm at home, if I've got them in the office, I can use them anywhere. There's a massive variety of exercises I can do with kettlebells. And I'm sure there's a load that I don't know, but you know, Mark Laws has taught me at least 10,000 separate exercises. They're relatively cheap for what you get, bang for your buck. They can provide full body functional workouts in a myriad of different ways, and they are not bound to having a certain amount of space. So, you know, if you've got the old courage corner, like Pavel Satsulin says, then you're all good. The other thing is they're highly accessible. So you can get them from Argos, you can get them from Wolverson's with the UKPT's discount code. And
Wow.
there's a lot of education out there, so they're accessible for everyone. Fucking have some of that.
Boom. Chris, tell him why you hate them so much.
Well, you just referenced Pavel, the man that science forgot, who doesn't have any actual credibility, qualifications. Everything ever said was a lie. Everything he says on a continuing basis is a lie. He has a cult of people who don't actually compete at anything, who therefore claim they're stronger than everyone else because they don't compete and they don't actually demonstrate that. I entered one of his competitions and won the class. And then they said, yeah, but we don't like the way you put it overhead because, you know, physics and how far you move the load, the distance you move it through isn't the thing that's important. It's whether you breathe the way Pavel says so. And if I can beat his own people at his own game without following his techniques, how good are they? It's not portable because if it was going to be a load that was actually challenging, how would you get it there? So by definition, the load that you're moving around that's portable is no use to you. You can't create sufficient overload because you don't have a heavy enough load. You can't do anything that actually loads because where you're going to put it. So, yeah.
Time. Oh, meow. The kettlebell claws
You'd have to strong
are
first.
out.
I love kettlebells.
I love a kettlebell.
Yeah, I love them.
I also see potential. I see potential flaws though in sometimes people think they're the answer to absolutely everything because they want it to be, whereas they might not be. But
to be fair though,
joking aside, strong first are in that group. They are in that group of people who are selling a cult and are selling a lie because nobody's taken a strong first qualification and parlaying that into working in any kind of field that they couldn't work in already without it. So they're selling something that doesn't actually do that much for you in that regard, using sham science that is kind of tenuous. And I do have an issue with that as a cult. So there we go. Let's upset a whole group of people.
To be fair though, just going to say this on the podcast. Everyone I know that's had COVID doesn't do kettlebell swings. I do kettlebell swings and I have yet to get COVID. So
I do kettlebell swings every week and I am yet to get COVID. Touch wood quickly.
That's evidence-based.
Evidence-based.
I haven't had.
Well, in fairness,
I haven't
you could
had
argue
COVID.
this.
I haven't had COVID, and I do enjoy the occasional pokey bum wank. So,
well, there's a commonality here. All of these are things that you can do without going to the gym. If you go to the gym, you get COVID and die. If you stay at home where you can pokey bum wank and swing your single kettlebell, you survive. Well, if you can, that really is.
That's evidence-based. People keep going on about evidence-based. That is fucking evidence-based. Anyway.
Sample of 3.
Chris, I do believe... Oh, I got my coffee here. I do believe you have got some statements prepared for us.
I do indeed.
For false, false, true. Thank you, Puppet. Could you please read out the 3 statements? Got my daddy muggler.
Very nice.
If she'd have walked in to give me this 30 seconds earlier when I was talking about pokey bum wanks, there is no way I wouldn't have got in trouble.
My false, false, true statements are: A, Chris Moyle stole my shower gel. B, Jules Holland stole my nail clippers. Or C, Tim Westwood stole my hair wax. Now, anyone who's actually young won't know who any of these people are.
Josh, I have to let you go first because I used to go first all the time, and you used to copy my answers.
So I think the chances of Tim Westwood stealing something from you is quite high because he's a bit gangster, isn't it? Well, he likes to pretend he's a bit gangster. So I can see that happening. But then Chris Moyle was meant to be like a bit of a lad's lad. So I can also imagine him, you know, trying to rob you. Not rob you, but like accidentally stealing something and being a bit cheeky or whatever. So I'm going to go with Chris Moyles.
What was the middle one again? Was it Jules Holland and nail clippers?
Yes.
Right. What sort of era are we talking here? What year did this happen?
2004.
Okay. So if it had happened in the 90s, Chris Moyles went through like a sweaty, fat, greasy phase, and he definitely wouldn't have needed shower gel. But if it happened 2004, he was a bit more clean cut by then. So the shower gel is possible. Jules Holland and nail clippers. Now, Jules Holland, as a pianist, should look after the tools of his trade. Therefore, I think he probably would have his own nail equipment with him at all times. Tim Westwood, I don't think he's the sort of man that uses hair wax or hair gel. So I am going to go for Chris Moyles and shower gel. Sorry, Josh.
Have you both gone for that?
Yeah.
You're both wrong.
Fuck it.
Jules Holland never returned my nail clippers. But your reasoning was very good, Mark.
Yeah, well, that shows my lack of logic, my retarded logic from my approaches to most things. Shed some light then. Because Jules Holland didn't shimmy up your drain pipe and take your nail clippers out the bathroom cabinet in the middle of the night, did he?
No, he didn't. I worked somewhere as a student where all these people performed and several other people performed and whatever. And Jules Holland had a small diva fit because he'd forgotten his nail clippers and he could feel his nails on the piano and said he wasn't going to play. So I had to ring one of my flatmates and get him to bring my nail clippers in so we could give him the nail clippers so that the event could go ahead. And he never returned them, thief.
I was so close to going
You
down.
were really close, yeah.
To be honest,
And
I'd been spouting nonsense for so long, I'd forgotten what answer Josh had given. My fault for thinking too much.
Mark, did that ever happen?
In fairness.
What, me talking too long?
No, just people needing nail clippers, otherwise they wouldn't go on stage.
Yeah, I am not going on unless I have my manicure. No, it didn't happen.
That was a good job, that was where Tim Westwood approached the building, and I said to him, "Hey mate, are you here to see Tim Westwood?" And he did not like that. He really did not like that. And I wish I'd done it on purpose, but I just had no idea what he fucking looked like.
Wow.
Imagine that. Sorry, mate, you can't come in. Can I see your tickets? Mate, I'm on the fucking ticket.
Yeah, good old days.
The good old days. We've all had some dodgy jobs. I was a chauffeur driver once at the Bollywood Oscars. That was it's crazy. Long story as to why it came about, but yeah, I had to drive. I had 2 SAS guys with me. The guy I had in the car was supposedly 5 times more famous than Tom Cruise. And I had to drive him from the hotel in Leeds down to like the arena in Bradford. I had to go and pick some guy up from York train station, and I was like, yeah, I know the way to York train station. Went the complete fucking wrong way, up the A64 too far, so we were late. This bloke who's like a multi-billionaire is standing there at York train station waiting, and it was all kicking off. Yeah, loads of the good old days with all the random old jobs.
Yeah, those were the days.
No, we had to take one of them to the train station in Leeds, and like I said, I had these 2 SAS guards, and they wanted to go from the car to the train in like a triangle formation around the person, and obviously 2 people don't make a triangle. So I was the fucking tip of the triangle. So I was like, I walked through Leeds train station pretending, because we're all wearing the same, like black suit, white shirt, black tie. We all looked the same. So I had to pretend to be like an SAS guy at the peak of the triangle for this fucking billionaire Bollywood actor to take to the train. I lapped it.
You haven't thought that through.
I've never walked so slow in my life.
You're thinking, I'm all right here because I've got 2 SAS guys with me. But when somebody attacks you, they're taking the principal back to the car and just fucking leaving you.
Yeah. What if someone had come from
Worst
behind
job
and taken them out, and I'm the last one? I'm like, oh fuck.
What's right? Fair mate. If they get taken out, you're fucked anyway, aren't you?
I don't know, mate.
The good old days.
Yeah, the good old days. The good old days. Joshua, has anybody asked any sensible / retarded questions in the group that we could ask Chris his opinion on to fill the last couple of minutes?
I'll be honest, there aren't really any relevant questions that have come up. A lot of it has just been COVID related about tiers.
Fucking boring. Can you go back a bit further and just find one?
Let me give me 10 seconds.
Take as long as
man, every time Boris speaks, I feel for the guy who runs day-to-day operations at Basra, because last time Boris was on telly, he hadn't even come off the telly, and in the Facebook group, people were asking, "Will I be able to work in this new tier?" And it was like,
yeah.
He wasn't in the fucking Cobra meeting, was he?
Yeah, I'm in. There's like the SimSpa group, UK PTs group. There's another PT forum I'm in. UK Active, I think, have got a group, and literally while they're talking, you got people going, "So, am I still allowed to train outdoors in tier 3?" He's like, just shut the fuck up, have a beer, go to bed tonight, and then if tomorrow afternoon you haven't received some form of notification from UK Active or whatever body who are watching this now at the same time as you, and tomorrow when they go to work, they're going to fucking bust their bollocks to try and get clarification, just shut the fuck up and wait.
Question.
Okay.
So
if I live in tier 4 and my sister's puppy lives in tier 2, am I allowed to stroke it?
No. Chelsea Martin says, what sort of assessments would more experienced PTs do with their clients? So if you had a new client coming on board, what would be your go-to assessments? Generalizing, obviously.
Okay, well, this is sort of what we said. It will be led by what they said to begin with. So if they come in and they're a regular PT client and we've got no clinical issues or anything like that, initially you're always doing that, aren't you? You're going through the pack, you're checking there's no medical issues, What do they want? And I think this sort of guides me down that route of going, if they say something normally fairly, it's SMART goals, isn't it? If they say something fairly loose and subjective, like I want to be more toned, it's that process then of breaking that down and going, well, okay, what do you think toned kind of means? Well, I want to look more like, toned. Okay, cool. So essentially, toned, what does tone mean? This is now your own internal dialogue in your head. It means looking at you, you're carrying some body fat, so you're going to have to get your body fat down, and we're going to have to hold on to muscle mass, then she'll appear more toned. So what does that look like? Well, we need the information of what the weight is, possibly some estimate of what body fat is, depending how intrusive that is and what skills and equipment you've got available. You might just need some circumferences to start with, and then some level of strength or strength endurance testing. So that will guide the kind of testing that I'll be looking at. So yeah, to be quite honest, in that situation where that's what they've come in and said, something that's fairly typical, that's the directions I'm going in. And when I start with that, and I said do something dead simple, like, you know, give them a minute and see how many bodyweight squats they can do. Actually watching them do that and what they look like is then going to lead the rest of my assessment, because if that looks like a complete mess and they're really struggling with that, that's leading me on to thinking, okay, well, I need to do some range of movement assessments for the lower body. Or if that's beyond what I'm capable of doing, or I've been trained to do, or I really understand how to do, I just need to understand progressions, regressions. She needs a regression where she doesn't need to get into a full squat position because she can't do that. You know, something like something counterbalanced or using a TRX or whatever. You might do some sort of modified press up test, but you're probably going to want an upper and a lower body indicator of strength endurance to give you your start point and some idea of weight, body fat. And then you're trying to get them to understand that the goals that you're going to set and how the program's going to look to get them there are with that overall goal of bringing body fat down and maintaining the muscle mass that they've got so they appear more toned. And then it's really about, to me, that communication, that explanation of, and it guides your programming then, because you can, if you can't say to them, the reason we are doing this exercise is because it does this in the light of those agreed goals, don't do the exercise then. Does that kind of make sense? We've got a process.
Absolutely. People used to come to me when I worked face to face. I would, if they, first and foremost, identifying why are they here, what do they want to achieve. If somebody alludes to the fact that they would like to lose some weight, whatever terminology they lose, tone up, lose weight, or however they phrase it, then you have to just have a benchmark. You need to know where you're at so we can celebrate the victory. So we're going to have to measure your weight, but it would also be an idea to take measurements like waist, hips, middle of the thigh, middle of the upper arm, stuff like the simple stuff. Now we're moving into an online format. I will make sure that if I'm doing it, I know exactly how I did it. So if now I've moved into an online format, I'll just make sure I give them some sort of tutorial to follow so they've got that consistency. Because to a certain degree, it doesn't really matter what you test, as long as you always test it in the same manner to get consistent results. To a different degree, it does matter what you test, because it just needs to be simple, non-invasive, and it's not going to humiliate them or embarrass or upset them too much. So I'll take that,
Mark.
Yeah.
This popped into just saying that. There's an easily available online calculators online, a US Navy tape measure formula to estimate body fat percentage. So for men, it's neck measurement, waist measurement, and weight, I think. And for ladies, it's neck measurement, waist measurement, hip measurement, and weight. And that's all you need. And in my experience of using that with distance clients, it's actually really reasonably useful. It's quite good accuracy wise, because obviously the US Navy had a big sample to use for the original research. And if you produce your own little tutorial that you upload onto YouTube and send them a link to it, I think it looks very professional, because you're guiding them and it's you and they can see it's you. So yeah, on that front, in terms of estimating body fat at a distance when you haven't got equipment and they haven't got equipment, it's simple and straightforward and quite useful.
Yeah. I would hammer home the point to them that if they're out of my facility and they're weighing themselves at home, just to make sure they use the same scales, same time, and in the same state of dress, just to add consistency. I would then do, in terms of from a movement perspective, I ask people to lay down on the floor and stand up so I can just observe how they move. I then ask them if they mind if I film them. I'll set a static camera 5 meters, 4 meters away from them, and I'll just ask them to face the camera and do 3 bodyweight squats facing the front, to the left, to the back, and to the right. And I don't cue them on depth, or people go, what do I do with my hands? I say, like, you just do 3 squats. Because I just want to sort of see how much depth they go to, how much range of movement have they got, do they have to use their arms as a counterbalance? But that comes from, I suppose, building up a skill set of being able to spot things in the screen that I can then identify weaknesses. So if you can't do that, don't do that test just for the sake of it. But practice, like start to learn, film yourself doing squats, or your family members or whoever you're close to, and just start to look for patterns in that. Then in terms of from a performance perspective, I would usually have a few basic things, like Chris sort of said. Is it a how many push-ups you can do in a minute or something like that, at whatever level of progression or regression you're comfortable with. But if that's a 60-year-old lady coming in, might be irrelevant. I might not test her performance because it might not be as necessary. I would sometimes also, I'd use Rachel France's 4-sign test with like the leg length discrepancy and a few bits like that, purely as a tool to show them that if they've been to see a PT before, or they've been to a gym and had an induction before, and they were just shown how to turn the treadmill on and where the stretch mats are hanging, like just to show them that the reason I'm charging more is because I'm looking at things differently to most people you've experienced before. So I would use a few things like that just to show, look, here's a before and after. We'll do this test. I'll go and do the 4-sign thing, come back and we'll see the results. And in 5 minutes, you can see this noticeable difference. So that's going to form the foundation for how my programming is going to work to make you better at stuff as quickly as possible. That's then going to help you to get better at the performance tests. That's going to have a knock-on effect to the measurements and the weight or how you feel intrinsically and stuff like that. So I'm fairly simple, but I've got a few elements that have been introduced over a decade or so as I've become more confident and competent in my own ability to look at someone doing something and notice things that can be changed.
Sounds pretty comprehensive.
I think it's worth noting that actually, if you look on something like Top End Sports, I think, is that the same website as Brian Mack?
I think so.
That's actually got a really comprehensive rundown of different fitness tests you can do. So, and a lot of them really simple, and it'll tell you what equipment you need and whatever. And it's worth spending some time on a website like that. That's free. Go on it. It's either Brian Mack or Top End Sports, like I say, and you just have a look at. I include that in some of my actual educational literature because it's there, it's free, it's a great resource, and it classifies them into strength, endurance, stability. An awful lot of them are actually referenced in evidence, and you can actually back up and say, this is where this come from. It's got norms, it's got real norms. The other thing you can look at is there is a website, Strength Standards, that people can submit lifts for, which is a little bit misleading in ways, because the only people who are going to be submitting are people who are actually interested. So it's going to skew the results somewhat. But even on there, it gives you an idea of at different ages and body weights, what kind of lift, and there's a whole load of lifts on there where people sit and what sort of level they're at. So there is a lot of information out there. And I think that's helpful to have some kind of norms or standards to have in mind of where you think is realistic to get this person to. Because if you're laying out a roadmap, it's not necessarily going to be realistic to get Doris, who's 87 with a recent hip replacement, to barbell back squat twice the body weight. So the fact that, the NSCA say that that's the standard, 1.8 times for a female is the standard she should have for injury risk reduction. That is for athletes in the normal age group of athletes who haven't had a hip replacement, and et cetera, et cetera. So context being very important. There is that information out there online, and we should be using it.
Nice.
Cool, good stuff. Lastly, Chris, Eddie Hall. Can't
Yes.
you in a forum of personal trainers without mentioning your involvement with him. That, as I said earlier, I don't think you. A lot of other people would fucking sing and dance about it. They'd wear a T-shirt, I work with Eddie Hall, everywhere they go, whereas you're a lot more modest about it. But could you just explain how that relationship came about, and then what was your involvement in helping him? Because it was pre-winning World's Strongest Man, wasn't it?
So he'd done the deadlift, he'd done the 500, so that is absolutely nothing to do with me whatsoever. And I wouldn't overstate or overplay my input, really, because he had all the priorities in place. He was already the strongest guy statically on the planet. All it came down to is I'd done some work with... I was living up in Scotland at the time, and I started seeing my now wife, who is local to Stoke-on-Trent. And the work I was doing was mainly sort of rehab type work with people who were injured and regressions, and then working them through stuff already. That's what I was doing. That was my main client base. But an awful lot of these people were very normal, and in fact, quite a lot of quite elderly women and such like. But when I started seeing her, she was being trained for Strong Woman by Eddie Hall's training partner, and he had some injury problems. And she asked me to talk to him and have a look at him about some of his injury issues, which we did. And then a few other people around Stoke-on-Trent I did some work with, and eventually it just kind of led to, I'd seen a few different people and ended up speaking to Ed and saying, you know, we could have a look at you and basically where you're at. And to be honest, it was really basic stuff. It was looking at active range of movements more than anything else, and just trying to get him to see that it doesn't make sense that you can be the strongest person on the planet by quite some margin in full deep hip flexion, yet everyone else, at least 2 years ago, was beating you at anything where you've got to move, because all of that horsepower that you've got there around your hips and in your legs isn't translating into being fast under load. So different things we could possibly look at for that. And I think all that happened really was he'd been to Staff's uni, and Staff's uni had actually identified this to him, but they talked to him in very boring, dry science terms, and nobody there really understood strongman. And I was a strongman fan. So when I talked to him and I was like, look, you're limited in this range compared to this range. This is the range that evolved in these events. Does this kind of ring true? And he could buy into that. And really from there, in all honesty, I became more of just like a clinger on, really. I was just there with them a lot while they were training, just giving little bits of assistance and help and stuff. And the same at events. But the main thing was just looking at why strength from statics didn't cross over so well into movement. And it was very Ed. The thing you got to remember with Ed is he will do what he wants. So you can offer suggestions, but he will take on the bits that he likes and he'll apply them as far as he sees fit. And if you want to try and push him into doing other things, you're going to be gone anyway. And I think that's one of the things you've got to be aware of. And to be honest, one of the other reasons that I'm not always overly public about that is there's loads and loads and loads of stuff that Ed does and that Ed advocates that have no background proof, anything else, that I wouldn't put my name to. But he believes in, and that's cool, and that's him. And it's been a very useful part of my career. But again, I don't necessarily want everyone to think that all the things that Ed necessarily believes and is happy to say are things that I necessarily believe and I'm happy to say either. And that's cool. I respect everything that he has achieved and everything else. And we've got still a good sound relationship, but it doesn't mean that I certainly wouldn't say I am his this, that, other, or anything like that. And I don't necessarily like the idea of him and Thor Price fighting. It doesn't sit overly well with me. The idea of 150 kilo plus men with limited combat sports background punching each other in the head. I think if you spend a little bit of time in a legitimate medical field, head injuries, concussion, where we're at with that, that's not something I'm massively down with.
No. Well, it's I've interviewed Eddie a couple of times and spoke to him off stage, behind the scenes, away from all the cameras, sort of one to one. And he said this was a time where he had won the World's Strongest Man, which was probably sort of summertime, May, June, July time, but it hadn't yet been aired on television, which is December time. So it was sort of in the October between the two. he was the world's strongest man, but very few people sort of knew about it. It wasn't broadcast everywhere. And he sort of said behind the scenes, he's like, listen, I've now achieved the one thing that I've set my whole life towards achieving. I have fucking destroyed my body and my relationships with friends or what have you, because I've been so focused on achieving this goal that now I need to absolutely milk the whatever opportunities come my way, because my body is so shot to bits. I need to finish the strongman and earn as much money as I can, basically, from whatever means. So that's not to say that the fight is only happening because of financial reasons, but he was very vocal in sort of saying that he gets that being that good at something so specific has had a very negative effect on the long-term lifespan of his body. And he recognized the fact that he had to lose shitloads of weight. He had to look at other means of income, whether that's hosting TV programs. Like he does I think it's quite funny actually when he goes around America, like eating fucking monster Porsches. He's very good on camera. He's got a good charisma, good banter, and fair play to him. Why not? But like I say, going into a combat environment, does it add up? Does the risk outweigh the benefit?
Mate, I absolutely love the guy. I've got all the time in the world for him. He's done loads for me, and he's a really lovely guy on many levels. And he's very shrewd. He gets criticised a lot. There are people who will call him stupid and stuff. I think that's incredibly naive and just wrong, to be honest, because he might not be particularly educated formally in some of the things that he expressed opinions on, but what he's very good at doing, it's like the Pareto principle, he's incredibly good at distilling out the small bit that's really important from all different things and stepping back and taking an overview and doing the big things that are important and matter. He's very, naturally, he's incredibly gifted at that. And the level of application that he put in order to achieve it, the people who weren't around at that time just have no idea. Everyone thinks to train now, and it's like, no, you're not even close to the number of different things he's doing consistently, never missing a workout, never missing a set, never missing a rep. Some of the things I've seen him do are just insane. His mental strength is incredible, absolutely phenomenal. And I do have all the time in the world for him. I'm not criticising him in any way, but...
Sorry, and for probably 95% of his strongman career, he still had to work full time as a mechanic or whatever it was he did. It was only probably in a very short last year or two of his career where he wasn't working full time. Is that right?
I don't know. By the time I met him, he wasn't working full time, but that had taken a while, and that in itself was obviously an enormous risk. And it's that sort of level of self-belief. Genuinely, what I wanted him to do, which probably wouldn't be as lucrative as what he's doing, I think he should have been doing. He should be on the speaker circuit, and he should be speaking to big business, because the things that he did, the way that he organised things, the way that he set his own pathway. So, strongman as a professional sport only exists because of Ed. There were no professional strongmen before Ed, and the only reason these guys are now getting endorsements and sponsorships and they're selling out arenas is because of the change that he made and the way that he did that. And that is down to his charisma, his personality, the fact he doesn't give a shit about upsetting people and people buy into that. And he's so good at all the things, self-help books and theory books that he has never read. I've asked him, he's never read these things. He's not aware of any of these theories, and he intuitively just does it. And it's things like understanding that if you want a goal, you have to break it down into the things that are going to cause that and focus on the causes and do that consistently day in, day out when it's boring. That people don't want to do, they focus on the goal and they want to know the shortcut. No, he doesn't do that. He does all the things that get you there. And these kinds of behaviors are the same success behaviors that you get across all aspects of your life. And I learned a tremendous amount from just being around him and just seeing how somebody can apply those kinds of success behaviors. But that's not necessarily scratching the such like that. I think, to be honest, he probably does an awful lot of his living now out of YouTube. And in fact, he is an amusing and entertaining guy to watch. And he's his sidekick.
He's box office, isn't he?
He's
a
amazing.
box office character. In at a time when content in the fitness sphere is fucking dull, repetitive, predictable. He's fun and funny and different, and he's got a hell of a character. I've only spent an hour or two in his company, but my answer to the question of ultimate podcast guest was Eddie Hall in when I answered it, because of the amount I picked up that goes on behind the scenes just from having a couple of sort of short chats with him away from prying eyes. But yeah, he's a hell of a guy, and I just thought I just thought I'd mention, because a lot of people might not know the involvement, and like I say, you very modestly, you don't talk about it a lot. I mean, if this was the late 90s and I went on holiday and I fucked Cameron Diaz, I would still be going on about it every single day to this day. Whereas you sort of a bit more modest about it, and you kind of take it all in your stride very sensibly and admirably.
Helping a 32-stone man who is sweating when he's standing still into his supportive clothing doesn't have much in common with fucking Cameron Diaz, to be fair, mate. They're not similar things.
Mate, she's a sweater. She did sweat a lot.
All right, okay. Good to know. Good to know.
But similarities. Anyway, I think that's it, Josh.
I think we're done.
Oh, have you got your final question to ask Chris about like where we can find him and all that?
Of course. Thank you for reminding me. It's been a long day. Chris.
Already. That's how interesting I am.
If people want to find you, get in contact with you, learn more about what you do, where's the best places for them to go?
So on Facebook, it is the Move Well Project. So the Move Well Project, then my name, and then alphabet soup, which makes skin crawl a little bit. Or Instagram, I think it's just the Move Well Project. Or just search my name on Facebook. I think I come up on my personal page. People can add me. But as I say, I am trying to develop something where we're giving personal trainers who do want to move forwards in a really meaningful way with their education access to do that, an opportunity to do that. So if anyone is interested in that, again, please do let me know.
Nice. So thank you so much for your time today. It's greatly appreciated. And I'm sure we'll have you again another time. Mark?
Yeah, no, damn right, mate. Thank you for your time. There's a huge amount of value in there, as expected. And for those who maybe weren't familiar with you or your work, I would encourage them to jump on social media and give you a follow. And when courses can start again face to face, if you start doing them, let us know, and we can send people your way, because I've attended, I've hosted a course, and it was one of the best ones that I hosted, with the real simple, effective take homes that are very, very useful for personal trainers. And like I say, whether you're working with someone right up here at this end of the spectrum or someone who's right down here at this end of the spectrum, there's so many similarities between them that can help people progress from one level to another, and that's the stuff that Chris talks about and that he puts into practice is very, very useful for personal trainers everywhere. So thank you, mate, and I'm sure at some point in 2021 we will have you back.
Thank you very much, gents.
Cheers, Chris. See ya. Merry Christmas, by the way.
Merry Christmas, gentlemen. I'll see you on the other side.
See you on the other side.
Thanks for joining us for today's show. Don't forget to check back weekly for new episodes. If you want to join the UK's largest Facebook group for personal trainers, just search for UK PTs.